Chapter 217. Sure detected a spider drone flying over his head. He did not attack. After a while, another spider drone flew over his head. His dragon will spread out quickly. In an instant, he detected the location of the 2,500 people across 130 kilometers. Bertha immediately sensed it when he probed with his draconic will. She frowned and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Someone is spying on us with telekinesis. As she spoke, her telekinesis also spread out quickly to resist Sure's dragon will. However, Sure's dragon will did not come into direct contact with her telekinesis at all. Instead, it blasted towards the young man operating the mech. Bang! The young man's body instantly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Everyone around was shocked. The captain beside him quickly shouted, "Little Jen, take over his mech." Since the mech was so important, it was naturally impossible for it to have only one operator. There were two substitutes beside him. If one died, the other two could replace him at any time. At the same time, Bertha, who had a ridiculously good figure, quickly spread out her telekinesis. She wanted to compete with Sure's telekinesis. However, when she probed, her psychokinesis hit nothing but air. The next moment, her brows suddenly furrowed into a knot. He raised his head abruptly and channeled all of his mental power to resist the attack. However, it was too late. Boom, 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 boom. Around them, 100 invisible meteors smashed down with a loud rumble. Most of these people were level 3 to level 5 hunters. They also felt that the situation was not good. As they activated their genetic weapons, they all jumped in all directions to dodge. The guy who was about to take over the mech was hit on the head by the dragon will meteorite. He was instantly smashed into meat paste. Boom, 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 boom. Explosions kept coming from all directions. Huge craters kept appearing. Terrifying shockwaves continued to spread out. Even though Bertha had blocked most of the dragon will meteorites, there were still more than 20 meteorites that came crashing down. Almost all of these 2,500 people were sent flying by the huge impact. In this wave of attack, more than 10 telekinesis grandmasters were directly torn to shreds by the huge shock wave. As for the remaining 5 psychic grandmasters, including Bertha, they all had powerful life-saving trump cards. The instant the shock wave hit, a layer of armor covered the surface of these telekinesis grandmasters' bodies. Only then would he not be torn apart. Of course, there were those who were too lucky and were directly smashed in the head by the dragon will meteorite. Even if they had armor, they were already dead. As for those level 1 hunters, more than 100 of them died on the spot. The rest of the scavengers below level 3 were either seriously or lightly injured. Hunters above level 3 had extremely fast reflexes, and their bodies were extremely strong. Therefore, the shockwave did not tear their bodies apart. What was even more terrifying was that a dragon will meteorite had already smashed into a level 7 hunter's head. However, the hunter did not suffer any other injuries except that his body was smashed into the ground and his head was dripping with blood. He could even move and fight normally. Sure was secretly shocked when he saw all this. The physical strength of the scavengers was too abnormal. At this moment, the mercenaries from the Flaming Beginning continent were even more shocked than Sure. In their opinion, the first hunting ground was simply a barren land. Moreover, due to the rules of the hunting ground, it was impossible for a level 10 great hunter to appear. It was even more impossible for a telekinesis grandmaster to appear. However, the attack just now was clearly the work of a telekinesis grandmaster. It was very likely that the attacker was a level 6 telekinesis grandmaster. How was this possible? The leader, Sha Qi, was even more shocked and furious. Initially, he had thought that with so many hunters, they would be able to dominate the lousy first hunting ground and sweep through everything in their path. However, he did not expect that they would be ambushed as soon as they arrived. They had lost more than 100 hunters and more than a dozen telekinesis grandmasters. This loss was simply too great. Damn it! Sandstorm Mercenary Group. Listen to my orders. Raze this barren land to the ground. He roared in exasperation. It was as if an adult had been slapped by a child in front of everyone. Everyone in the mercenary group was also furious. This barren land, a low-level hunting ground, had caused the Sandstorm Mercenary Group to suffer such a great loss. This was outrageous. The leader shouted to the third substitute mecha operator, "Little Hai, operate the mecha." Little Hai's heart suddenly tightened. He wanted to say that he had only been learning from his master for a month. However, when he saw the leader's murderous eyes and the leader's wife's eyes, he trembled. His heart suddenly trembled. He hurriedly replied, "Yes." As he spoke, he untied the belt from his master's waist and wrapped it around his waist. He turned on the virtual keyboard and virtual screen. Then, he tapped a few times on the keyboard and silently opened a document. When the leader saw the title of the document, he almost spat out blood. The title of the document was Cheetah G35-1 Mecha Manual. Pfft. When the surrounding people saw this, they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Bertha's heart was already burning with anger. She clearly felt that the opponent's telekinesis was similar to hers, but so many people were killed right under her nose. This made her very unhappy. At this time, she saw Little Hai silently open the manual. He was even more furious than before. She moved her telekinesis. Rip, Little Hai was directly torn into several pieces. Sha-Chi, who was next to her, did not have time to persuade her. He could only helplessly shake his head. At this time, Bertha's telekinesis spread to a radius of 60 kilometers. As a level 6 telekinesis master, her telekinesis could spread to a maximum radius of 60 kilometers, to explore everything around her. She wanted to find the guy who had just used his telekinesis. However, no matter how she searched, even if she searched every stone and every piece of snow in the area, she could not find the person who carried out the attack. At this time, Mo Shi jumped out of the snow pit where he was hiding. He dusted off the snow and ice on his body and glanced at the blue sky. Those drones had lost control and had already flown away aimlessly. The cheetah mecha had also lost control and was wandering aimlessly on the ice field. Mo Shi smiled faintly and took a step forward. He instantly disappeared on the spot. Only the next giant dragon shadow was left behind. Not long after, Mo Shi appeared in the sight of those people from the flaming beginning continent. Their faces all turned cold. Bertha immediately wanted to use her telekinesis to tear Mo Shi into pieces. However, Sha-Chi next to her stopped her and said, "Maybe this person knows the whereabouts of our little brother. It's not too late to kill him after interrogating him." Only then did Bertha dismiss the idea of directly tearing Mo Shi into pieces. At the same time, Sha-Chi stared at Mo Shi with a solemn expression and said to the others, "Everyone, get ready to fight at any time. This person is not simple." Chapter 218. Mo Shi walked slowly towards the 2,000 people. The 2,000 people did not make a move immediately. But everyone was on high alert, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. When they first arrived at the first hunting ground, they looked down on everything here. In their eyes, coming to the first hunting ground was just a vacation. However, after experiencing the telekinesis meteorite, they were extremely vigilant against this person. After all, this person was likely to be a psychic master above level 6. Mo Shi came to a place 50 meters away from these people and stood still. Everyone saw that Mo Shi looked exactly the same as the infected person they had killed before. They were a little confused. Could this guy be a twin? Sha-Chi tapped twice on the watch on his left wrist. The holographic images of a long-haired young man and a bald middle-aged man appeared beside him. He pointed at the two images and asked Mo Shi, "Have you seen them?" Mo Shi did not hide and nodded, "Yes." When Bertha heard this, an anxious look appeared in her eyes as she asked, "Where are they?" Mo Shi's face was calm as he said casually, "Kill him." He said it so casually, as if he had just killed an ant. As soon as he said this, the scene fell silent. The next moment, Bertha's psychokinesis suddenly covered the sky and pressed down on Mo Shi. "Die for me!" A roar full of anger and hatred came from her mouth. Rip! The sound of cloth being torn could be heard. Mo Shi's body was torn into several pieces. It was even more miserable than the doppelganger beside the blood waterfall. However, this was only Mo Shi's doppelganger. When he knew that his strength was far inferior to the other party, how could Mo Shi take the risk? He just let this doppelganger bring his personal reservoir to those people. At this time, the doppelganger had been killed. But a circular hole with a diameter of 50 meters appeared in the air. Everyone looked at the circular hole that suddenly appeared and were a little confused. What is this? Some experienced mercenaries felt their hearts palpitate when they arrived at the entrance of the cave. "Not good, quickly disperse." The old mercenary screamed and quickly turned around to flee. However, it was already too late. A figure leaped out from the cave in an instant. He swallowed the old mercenary in one gulp. The old mercenary was a level 3 hunter. He didn't even have time to scream before he was buried in the belly of the figure. At the same time, the figure's body continued to emit crisp sounds. Ka ka ka, accompanied by this sound, the figure rapidly expanded. In the end, it reached a length of 200 meters. At this moment, the figure looked like a crocodile. However, the scales on its body were more solid than those of a crocodile. Its limbs were thicker than a crocodile's. 4 claws, each as big as a house. Its tail was as thick as a giant python, and it was almost 100 meters long. Moreover, the long tail was triangular. Every edge was an extremely sharp blade. At the sight of this, all the low-level hunters were dumbfounded. This is a desolate beast? How is that possible? How can there be a desolate beast in the first hunting ground? According to the information they had obtained, the strongest mutated beast in the first hunting ground was only a level 10 mutated beast due to the limitations of the rules. How could there be a desolate beast? Moreover, this desolate beast had swallowed a level 3 hunter in one gulp. It was definitely a desolate beast of level 5 or above. As for the high-level hunters who had reached level 5 and above, their expressions changed slightly. However, that was all. Looking at the speed of this desolate beast, it was at most level 5 or so. As hunters of level 5 or above, they didn't have to worry at all. Moreover, there was the leader, a level 8 hunter, and the leader's wife, a level 6 psychic master. Why would they panic? However, in the next moment, they knew how stupid their thoughts were. The speed of this desolate beast was a little slow and couldn't outrun the hunters of level 3 or above. However, the flesh on its body wriggled. In an instant, a sanguisurincus as thick as an arm was shot out. This sanguisurincus shot out like lightning and directly pierced through the body of a level 5 hunter. At the same time, it continued to shoot forward like lightning and pierced through the bodies of more than 10 people in succession. In the next moment, this sanguisurincus exploded into hundreds of tiny sanguisurincus in these people's bodies. They pierced out of these people's bodies. It looked like hundreds of blood-red toothpicks had pierced into a ball of yarn. This time, everyone's expressions changed drastically, including those level 7 hunters and Sha Qi, who was a level 8 hunter. This desolate beast could actually kill a level 5 hunter in an instant. Its strength was at least level 6 or even higher. Just as they were shocked, 50 sanguisurincus shot out from the surface of the sea dragon clone's body in all directions. Puff, 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 puff. Hundreds of people were instantly pierced by these 50 sanguisurincus. Then, they were pierced into hedgehogs by the tiny sanguisurincus that burst out from the sanguisurincus. Then, these sanguisurincus were retracted and a second wave of sanguisurincus was quickly released. 2 waves in a row had taken the lives of more than 300 scavenger hunters. Among them, there was no lack of level 5 hunters. Mo Shi's consciousness controlled the sea dragon clone to continuously shoot out sanguisurincus, harvesting the lives of those people. Although the sea dragon clone's speed was not as fast as those hunters, the speed of the sanguisurincus shot out far exceeded that of those humans. Moreover, these sanguisurincus seemed to have no limit to the distance. Even if some people had already escaped 2 kilometers away, their bodies were still pierced through. None of the hunters could withstand this sanguisurincus attack. Even those who had life-saving trump cards instantly condensed armor on the surface of their bodies and used genetic martial arts to resist. In front of this sanguisurincus, at most, they would be delayed by a few seconds. In the end, they would still be pierced through. Even Mo Shi did not expect these sanguisurincus to be so terrifying. Seeing this, the captain's expression was extremely solemn. Was the Sandstorm mercenary group that he had painstakingly built going to be destroyed just like this? He was shocked and angry. He shouted to Bertha next to him, "Try to suppress it with telekinesis." Bertha next to him was shocked. "I'm already trying, but this wild beast seems to be able to use telekinesis, and its telekinesis is on par with mine. My telekinesis can't affect it at all." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was even more shocked in their hearts. A desolate beast with such powerful strength actually possessed the power of thought. What the hell was this? One had to know that telekinesis had appeared in zombies on the Flaming Land. There were blood breeds with telekinesis. There were also zombies with telekinesis. But there had never been a wild beast with telekinesis. In the midst of his shock, Xiaofan shouted, "All psychokinesis, use telekinesis to suppress it together. All hunters, use energy weapons at the same time." All the scavenger hunters were shocked when they heard this. Chapter 219. All hunters, attack together with your energy weapons. Sha Qi, the captain, commanded. All the hunters felt a chill in their hearts when they heard this. After using their energy weapons, the energy in their bodies would be depleted. If their energy weapons couldn't kill this wild beast, then they could only wait for death. It seemed that the captain was going to risk his life. But there was no other way at this time. They couldn't escape anyway. This wild beast seemed to have the intelligence of a human. The further they ran, the faster they would die. Therefore, the genetic weapons on the right arms of all the remaining 2,000 hunters emitted a scorching red and white light. They turned into energy weapons. The next moment, more than 2,000 red and white lights shot out from their energy weapons. They instantly attacked the sea dragon. Hiss hiss hiss. Hiss hiss hiss. Hiss hiss hiss. Their energy weapons instantly pierced through the defense of the sea dragon clone. Thousands of holes were shot out of the sea dragon clone's body. However, compared to the huge body of the sea dragon clone, these holes caused by energy were not worth mentioning. For the sea dragon, which was more than 200 meters long, it was equivalent to more than 2,000 needles stabbing its body at the same time. Of course, these 2,000 needles were only a little too deep. The sea dragon clone's attack did not stop at all. Every time the Sanguisurincus attacked, it could kill more than 100 people. But at this moment, a ray directly hit the sea dragon's left eye. The sea dragon immediately roared in pain. Roar! Amidst the roar, it suddenly opened its mouth. A stream of green liquid suddenly spurted out. The green liquid fell on the body of an armored scavenger. The armor on the hunter's body was corroded in a very short time like rusty iron pieces and slid off one after another. Then, the flesh on his body kept making sizzling sounds as it was quickly corroded. "Ah, help me!" The hunter let out an extremely miserable cry. Just hearing it made one's scalp tingle and their hearts turn cold. The strong acid that the sea dragon clone spat out was much more corrosive than the strong acid of the bloodlust zombie slayer. The hunter's flesh and blood were like melted chocolate, falling down quickly. Eerie white bones were exposed. Then, even the bones were completely melted. Even the ground beneath his feet was corroded, forming a huge bowl-shaped pit with a diameter of more than 10 meters. Moreover, the sea dragon's spray covered a wide area. When it opened its huge mouth, everything within a radius of several hundred meters was covered. Hundreds of hunters within hundreds of meters suddenly screamed and turned into a pool of blood. Even a level 7 hunter had no power to resist. The sea dragon spat out several mouthfuls in a row. More than 500 hunters and psyche masters were turned into a pool of blood in the strong acid. This scene caused everyone to be incomparably terrified. As mercenaries, they had seen many dead people in their lives. However, this was the first time they had seen so many people being corroded to death by strong acid. This was the first time they had seen so many people die at once. And what worried them the most was that they all knew that desolate beasts had the ability to breathe out energy. This was the most powerful killing move of a desolate beast. Up until now, this desolate beast had yet to use its energy breath. It was like a sword hanging over their heads that could fall at any time. Naturally, Mo sure couldn't casually use the energy breath. Although the energy breath was strong, it was the same as the energy weapons of the hunters. Every time it was used, it would be used less. Even the sea dragon clone, a level 10 desolate beast, could only use it 10 times. At this moment, another energy ray directly penetrated the heart of the sea dragon clone. However, this didn't kill the sea dragon clone. Hundreds of tentacles grew out of its heart and sewed it up like needles and threads. And it was more seamless than a needle and thread. However, Mo sure could clearly feel that this time, the tentacles in the sea dragon clone's body sewed up the wound much slower than before. This was because the dozens of psyche masters on the other side were using their psyche power to kill the virus and cells in the sea dragon clone's body at the molecular level. The sea dragon clone's level 3 dragon will was originally equivalent to the psyche power of a level 6 psyche master. However, There were dozens of Psyche Masters on the other side helping. The Sea Dragon clone's dragon will was a little strenuous. At this moment, the head of the Sea Dragon clone was pierced by 2 more rays. The tentacles formed by the virus in its body were even more powerless when they were sewn up. Seeing this, Mo Sure immediately controlled the Sea Dragon clone. It opened its mouth abruptly. A blood-red energy pillar was suddenly spat out from its mouth. This energy pillar was more than 100 times thicker than the rays emitted by the hunters. It was more than 2 meters thick in diameter. Furthermore, the energy pillar swept across the area. The energy pillar of the Sea Dragon clone was unlike the energy rays of the hunters, which could only last for a few seconds at a time. This energy pillar actually lasted for dozens of seconds. It swept left and right, up and down, vertically, and in a circle. The area covered was extremely large and the range was extremely wide. It made it impossible for the hunters to hide. All the hunters who were swept by the energy pillar were almost instantly turned into flying ashes. With just this sweep, more than 500 hunters were killed. After another round of shooting, more than half of the remaining hunters were killed. Now, less than 100 of the 2,500 people were left. Of those great Psyche Masters, only 2 were left. One was Bertha, a level 6 Psyche Master, and the other was a level 3 Psyche Master. It wasn't until now that all the mercenaries realized that they were finished. This dire beast wasn't like the level 5 or level 6 dire beast they had thought before. Even the leader of the level 8 hunters was helpless in front of this dire beast. Then it was at least a level 9 dire beast, or even a level 10 dire beast. In the face of such an existence, no one could deal with it unless the cheetah mech came over. But the 3 people who controlled the cheetah mech were already dead. If that was the case, the rest of them would only die without a doubt. Mo Sure was also quite shocked at this time. He knew that the energy attack of the Sea Dragon clone was powerful, but he didn't expect it to be so powerful. The so-called trump cards and magic treasures of these hunters and psychic masters were completely useless in the face of the energy breath of the Sea Dragon's clone. If he had known that the energy attack of the Sea Dragon clone was so powerful, he would have used a big move as soon as he came up. Why bother with Sanguisurincus, strong acid, and the like? Next, he planned to use another energy breath to kill the rest of the people. But at this moment, Long Shachi suddenly raised his hands and shouted, "Let's go! I surrender, all of us surrender." This time the remaining 100 or so mercenaries were stunned. Bertha was also stunned. In all of their impressions, Shachi had always been a person who would rather die than submit, a person who would rather break than bend. Even if everyone else surrendered, he would never surrender. Why did he take the initiative to surrender before the others? Chapter 220. No one had expected that before the others had surrendered, their commander would be the first to surrender. And no one expected their leader to surrender to a desolate beast. Desolate beasts basically had no intelligence. Did it know how to surrender to it? But what they didn't expect was that after their leader raised his hands and shouted his surrender, this terrifying desolate beast had actually stopped its attack. Shachi heaved a sigh of relief. He turned around and explained to everyone. This desolate beast is not as smart as a desolate beast. It's more like a human. Even if it's not that smart, there must be a human controlling it. Everyone understood. It turned out that their leader was surrendering to the human behind the desolate beast. But they still didn't understand. With their leader's unyielding character, how could he surrender? Shachi said to everyone, "Retract your genetic and energy weapons. Quick, don't wait for it to go back on its words." Everyone looked at each other. One by one, they retracted their genetic and energy weapons. Based on the current situation, if they continued to fight, they would probably die in the next second. If they surrendered as their leader said, although the desolate beast might not let them go, at least they would die a slower death. Who wouldn't want to live a few more seconds? Their leader, Sha Qi, shouted to the Sea Dragon clone. "I'm the leader of all of them. If you want to kill me alone. Please let my brothers and my woman go." The Sea Dragon clone didn't move. Sha Qi heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the desolate beast didn't intend to attack again. He turned around and said to everyone, "Every one of you, join my Sandstorm mercenary group. You're my brothers." "Hi Sha Qi, made a wrong decision and lost the lives of so many of my brothers. I can't bear to see the remaining 100 or so brothers die." Then, he turned around and looked at his woman affectionately. "Bertha, I'm too stupid and caused the death of so many of our brothers. But I can't watch you die for nothing. I'll stay. All of you leave. Nah." The remaining 100 or so people in the mercenary group felt their blood boiling. Their leader was willing to give up his life for them. How could they let their leader die for nothing? "Leader, let's fight it. If we die together." When we first joined the mercenary group, we were already brothers. Since we can't survive, we might as well die together. Bertha's tears fell like rain as she sobbed. "Sha-Chi, I'll accompany you. All of our brothers will accompany you." Sha-Chi's eyes were also filled with tears as he reprimanded his brothers. "Shut up. You are all people with parents and families. If you die here, who will your parents and wives depend on in the future? If I can use my life to exchange for all of your lives, as the regiment commander, I will not shirk my duty." He then turned around and said to Bertha, who had an exaggerated figure, "Bertha, don't think about me when you go back. Find a good man and marry him." As he spoke, his own voice was choked with emotions. He hugged Bertha tightly, as if he didn't want to leave her again. Bertha's tears fell like rain. "Sha-Chi, no. If you die, how can I live alone? Sha-Chi, we agreed to die together." However, before she could finish her sentence, she stopped abruptly. Rip. Her body was torn into two halves. And the person who tore her body apart was none other than someone else. It was her husband, her lover, Sha-Chi. This sudden change occurred. Everyone was dumbfounded. Their minds were a little jammed, and they couldn't react in time. Even Mo was shocked. Previously, Sha-Chi had said that he wanted to surrender and let them go, and that he would die alone. Mo naturally didn't believe these words. He had been guarding against Sha-Chi. If he dared to make a sudden move, Mo would be able to turn him into ashes in an instant. However, Mo had never expected that Sha-Chi would suddenly attack and kill his beautiful wife under such circumstances. What kind of F***king plot was this? Just as everyone was still in a daze, Sha-Chi swung his hands again. His wife, who had been torn into two halves, was torn into pieces again. His expression was ferocious, and a genetic weapon suddenly appeared on his right arm. Then, a red and white light shone from the genetic weapon, and it transformed into an energy weapon. The next moment, a red and white light suddenly shot out from the energy weapon. It instantly shot towards the more than 100 mercenaries. Bang! A single sweep of the gun had killed more than 20 wild hunters. Bang! With another sweep of the gun, more than 20 hunters were directly shot into two. The remaining mercenaries only reacted at this moment. Some quickly turned around and wanted to escape. Some wanted to form a genetic weapon to counterattack. However, their levels were much lower than Sha-Chi's. Moreover, Sha-Chi was scheming against them. It was already too late for them to form a genetic weapon now. Bang bang bang. After a few more sweeps, the more than 100 mercenaries all fell to the ground. These mercenaries, including Sha-Chi's wife, Bertha, all had an expression of extreme disbelief on their faces. Even until death, they couldn't believe that their leader, who had always treated them like brothers, would suddenly turn around and kill them. Bertha also couldn't believe that her husband, who had always been obedient to her and spoiled her like a princess, would suddenly turn around and kill her. And his method was so cruel. Previously, everyone thought that Bertha was the most ruthless person in the entire mercenary group. But now, they understood that the most ruthless person in the mercenary group was their leader, Sha-Chi. After Sha-Chi killed those people, he confirmed that none of them were left alive. There was a pleased look on his face. He let out a long sigh and looked up at the sky. Awesome! But a moment later, he knelt down toward the east with tears in his eyes. He knocked his head heavily on the ground and said, "Dad, Mom, Big Brother, I've finally avenged you." As he spoke, his voice was choked with sobs, as if he had returned to several years ago. Then he told his story to the Sea Dragon clone. 23 years ago, I was only a 3-month-old child. At that time, my dad was the owner of the first hunting ground. He has a subordinate named Belky who plotted to kill my parents and my brother and took over the first hunting ground. Fortunately, My father's guard at that time risked his life to bring me out of the encirclement. Later on, I gradually grew up and founded the Sandstorm Mercenary Group. It's also that one day, I can fight my way to the first hunting island, avenge my parents and elder brother, and take back the first hunting ground. It was only later that I discovered that Bertzi's daughter Bertha was actually a psychic grandmaster. It wasn't easy to kill them. So I could only take the opportunity to get close to Bertha and finally married her. I planned to find an opportunity to kill their entire family for revenge. But if I did it casually, it was likely that someone would find out. This time, coming to the first hunting ground gave me the opportunity to kill Bertha first. Once Bertha is dead, I will have a greater chance to kill Bertzi and his wife when I go back. At this point, Shao-Chi wiped his eyes and said to the sea dragon clone, "Sir, please give me a chance to take revenge. After I've taken my revenge, I'll come back and be at your disposal." Chapter 221. After Shao-Chi said these words, he lowered his head and looked very sincere. He did not dare to resist. For such a person, according to Mo Shi's personality, he would not hesitate to kill him. Although this person had a blood feud, so it was understandable. But to be able to endure for so long, betraying his brother and tearing apart his wife, Mo Shi would not let such a person go easily. But today was different. Mo Shi's main body rushed over from afar with dragon shadow step. Shao-Chi saw another person that looked exactly the same as the previous two infected people running over. He felt strange in his heart. Just how many of these infected bodies were there? But he already knew that this wild beast was definitely controlled by this infected person. He quickly said to Mo Shi, "Please allow me to go back and take revenge. I swear on my energy weapon if I say half a lie, I will die from the backlash of my energy weapon." Mo Shi coldly snorted in his heart. "Swear on your energy weapon? Swear on your sister." Mo Shi had absorbed the memories of those people and knew that swearing on energy weapons was very common in the Flaming Origin continent. But swearing this thing was just nonsense. Whoever believed in such a thing was an idiot. How many couples vowed to love each other, but didn't they part ways in the end? Shao-Chi saw that Mo Shi didn't say anything, so he secretly tried to guess Mo Shi's meaning. Mo Shi's expression did not change. He said in his mind, "System, designate the reward, Virus 0. The system quickly responded, "Frowny face designation of reward requires 1 million evolution points. The reward, Virus 0, requires 10 billion evolution points. This time, sign in will consume 10 billion and 1 million evolution points. Are you sure you want to sign in?" Puff. Mo Shi almost spurted out a mouthful of blood. If he knew this would happen, he would not have wasted the Virus 0 last time. But since it had come to this, he could only grit his teeth and accept it. Yes. Soon, the system prompt sounded in his mind again, "Frowny face sign in successful. Sign in reward, 1 Virus 0. Mo Shi took a look inside his backpack. Then he gave it a thought. The virus had already appeared in the palm of his right hand. With the naked eye of a human, it was naturally impossible to see the virus. But Mo Shi could feel it. He bent the middle finger of his right hand and clasped it with his thumb. He flicked it lightly. The Virus 0 had already stuck to Shao-Chi's body. Then, it entered his body through his pores. Shao-Chi naturally didn't know about this, but his heart thumped. What did this gesture mean? "Are you letting me go?" At this moment, Shao-Chi felt dizzy. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his head. However, that feeling only lasted for a fleeting moment. He was shocked. What the hell? Could it be that this fellow had attacked him? Mo Shi finally opened his mouth. "You can leave now." Shao-Chi suddenly raised his head. His eyes filled with disbelief. Before this, he had killed his own brother and now, he had killed his wife. Firstly, it was for revenge. Secondly, it was to express his sincerity to this expert. He hoped that this expert would let him go. Of course, he knew that the chances were slim. No expert would let him go under such circumstances. Wouldn't that be letting the tiger return to the mountain? But as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he had to try. Even if he failed, it was better than waiting for death. However, he had never expected that this foolish expert would actually believe his words. And he really wanted to let him go. This simply couldn't be described as foolish anymore. Naive, melon, silly, simple-minded. In Shachi's opinion, all the words used to describe fools were not enough to describe this guy's foolishness. Of course, he also thought of another possibility. That was, this expert let him go for another purpose. But after he left here, he would be in the flaming land 30 light years away. What was he after? So he thought about it and ruled out the latter. He felt that this guy was purely stupid. But on the surface, he still pretended to be grateful. He kept thanking him. "Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Don't worry, after I go back and get my revenge, I'll come back to serve you. I'll be your slave." But at the same time, he thought that the cheetah mech was still wandering outside. After the cheetah mech lost control for 10 minutes, it would change to automatic mode. At that time, as long as it encountered a creature in the first hunting ground, it would start a massacre. Together with those spider drones, it would constantly capture information about all the creatures in the first hunting ground. Then, the cheetah mech would become a terrifying killing machine. As long as the battery was not depleted, it would continue its massacre. And the battery inside the cheetah mech was a super hydrogen battery with a huge capacity. And it could continuously charge with solar energy. So it was almost impossible to wait for the battery to run out. Thinking of this, Xiaoqi was secretly happy. Then, he respectfully bowed to Mo Shi. "Then, I'll go back first." With that, he turned around and carefully walked forward for thousands of meters. Then, he suddenly accelerated and ran in the direction of the blood waterfall. When he arrived at the blood waterfall, he pressed a few buttons on the multifunctional watch on his left wrist. A bluish-white light shot out from the watch and landed on his body. A moment later, he turned into a ball of bluish-white light. He disappeared in an instant. Until now, Mo Shi only sneered and withdrew his mind. Last time, he had already considered that if he killed the people of the Flaming Land, they would send more and stronger people. So he had already thought of a countermeasure. Just now, he had implanted the virus 0 into Xiaoqi. Although the distance of 30 light-years was too far, he was afraid that he could not use the dragon's will to contact the virus and activate it. But he had already implanted a strand of dragon's will into the virus. That strand of dragon's will also contained a trace of Mo Shi's consciousness. This trace of consciousness only had one use: to detonate the dragon's will after an hour. At this time, he had detected that the guy had left Earth. Mo Shi began to flip through that guy's memories. Yes, just now, Mo Shi used memory plunder on Xiaoqi. But that guy's body was too strong, so after the plunder, Xiaoqi only felt a sharp pain in his head. Other than that, there was no change. From Xiaoqi's memories, Mo Shi understood the Flaming Land a lot more. At the same time, he also learned about the cheetah mech from that guy's memories. He frowned slightly. This cheetah mech was a bit troublesome. From that guy's memories, he knew that the only way to destroy that mech was to use an attack that far exceeded the strength of its energy shield and destroy it in one blow. But that required at least the level of a desolate hunter. Currently, Mo Shi could not do that at all. The other way was to control the keyboard and turn off that guy. Mo Shi did not know anything about that, so naturally, he could not turn it off. But soon, Mo Shi threw this problem to the back of his mind. Because when he was flipping through this guy's memories, he found a bigger problem. Chapter 222. In the ice and snow of the Antarctic continent. A man and a beast stood in this world of ice and snow. Mo Shi furrowed his brows slightly. He didn't pay any attention to the wind and snow that blotted out the sky. He was looking through Xiaoqi's memories, looking for a way to deal with the cheetah mecha. But after a moment, his face suddenly froze. His eyebrows were tightly knitted into a knot. He cursed, F***ck. As he spoke, he instantly withdrew the sea dragon clone. His figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. All of this was because he had just found out from Xiaoqi's memories that there were more than 2,500 people who came to Earth this time. There were 5,000 people. 5,000 people were divided into 2 groups and teleported to Earth. But because there were too many people teleported, they used a new coordinate that had never been used before this time. That new coordinate was on Big Goose Tower in Qin Province. The location of Big Goose Tower was not far from Base C1. Moreover, their 2 coordinates were teleported only 10 minutes apart. As for the other 2,500 people, it was very likely that they were already in base C1. If he rushed back at this time, even with the speed of Dragon Shadow Step, it would take more than 20 minutes. It would probably be too late. In fact, it was just as Mo sure thought. Just 10 minutes after he left base C1. In the sky above Big Goose Tower, more than 2,500 blue and white light balls slowly appeared. Then they turned into human silhouettes. Among these 2,500 people, the strongest ones were 2 level 7 hunters. They quickly called out the spherical drones and probed around. Not long after, they found base C1. Immediately, they headed toward base C1. With the speed of their flying skateboards, they arrived at base C1 in less than 10 minutes. They floated high above base C1. They were like a group of gods high above. When the people in base C1 saw this group of people suddenly appear, they were all at a loss and panicked. Happy was working in the corpse farm. Suddenly, she heard someone shouting outside the wall, "Look up, look up." She quickly looked up. When she saw it, she also panicked. They had seen creatures flapping their wings and floating in the sky. However, they had never seen anyone hovering in the air on a hoverboard. Moreover, with the current technology on Earth, it was impossible for a flying skateboard to appear. At this moment, among the 2,500 mercenaries, the vice captain glanced at the humans below. He sneered disdainfully. Then, he turned on the holographic projection. The long-haired young man and the bald middle-aged man were projected. Looking down from above, he asked like an emperor asking his subjects, "You natives, have you seen these two people before?" Everyone in base C1 shook their heads. The vice captain snorted coldly. "A bunch of ignorant natives." The other deputy commander continued to ask. "Then do you know who might have seen these two people?" Everyone was exchanging glances with each other. A figure flashed through their minds at the same time. Mr. Mo. In the past few years, Mr. Mo often went outside the base. If there was anyone who was most likely to have seen these two people, it was undoubtedly Mr. Mo. However, they naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to say it out loud. Mr. Mo had done so much for the base, so they only had gratitude for him. These people obviously didn't come with good intentions. If they found Mr. Mo, it wouldn't be good for either the base or Mr. Mo. Therefore, everyone shook their heads. "I don't know. I don't know." In the sky, one of the vice captains saw this and shook his head, cursing. This group of natives is a group of King primitive people. They haven't seen anything and they don't know anything. However, another vice captain smiled and said, "Captain, don't be anxious. Captain Chen, don't be anxious. I can tell that these natives are very cunning. Judging from their expressions, they should know something." As he spoke, he waved his hand. Immediately, a psychic master moved his mind power. In an instant, he grabbed two people. Hiss, hiss. Two soft sounds of cloth being torn apart. In the splashing of blood, two psychokinesis were directly torn apart. The psychic master commander sneered and asked, "Is anyone willing to speak?" The faces of the people below changed dramatically. However, no one said anything. Because Mo Sure had saved the base many times, they subconsciously thought that Mo Sure would definitely appear at the critical moment. Hiss! Two more people were torn apart. Everyone was terrified. But still, no one said anything. There was a look of surprise in Happy's eyes. In the sky, the psychic master saw that still no one answered and frowned slightly. But then he relaxed his grip. "Good, you have a backbone. I like it. Then from now on, if you don't speak, I will kill one person every second. After I kill 10 people, if you don't speak, I will kill 10 people every second. Then I will kill 100 people every second." In the time that he said these words, two more people were torn apart. The entire C1 base was silent. Only the sound of cloth being torn could be heard continuously. 10 seconds later, 10 people's broken bodies were scattered on the ground. Then, hiss, 10 sounds were heard at the same time. 10 people's bodies were directly torn apart. Hiss, another 10 people's bodies were all torn apart. When everyone saw this scene, they all retreated in horror. But it was useless to retreat. In the face of a psychic master, these hunters, corpse hunters, and psychokinesis had no power to resist at all. They didn't even have a chance to escape. And those people in the sky, Some of them had cold expressions. Some of them had bloodthirsty and excited expressions. Some of them had sarcastic expressions. A level 3 psychic master saw the deputy commander constantly tearing apart the natives below. He couldn't help but lick his lips. There was a gulping sound in his throat. Then he moved closer to the commander, laughed and said, "Commander, can I do it?" The commander of the psychic master looked at the level 3 psychic master and said with a smile, "Why, are you hungry?" The level 3 psychic master answered with a smile, "I haven't fought for a long time. My hands are a little itchy." The commander of the psychic master nodded. "Okay, you do it." The level 3 psychic master immediately said, "Thank you, commander, thank you." As he spoke, he moved his psychic power. Hiss! A sound louder than the previous one was heard. 100 people were torn apart in an instant. Even more than the deputy commander. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The scene was too horrible to look at. The deputy commander shook his head. "You don't talk about martial ethics. At least 10 of them are enough to kill 100 people, and then 100 of them. If you do this, these natives will think that I don't keep my word." The level 3 psychic master laughed and said, "I haven't fought for a long time. I didn't hold the fire for a while, hee hee." As he spoke, he moved his psychic power. Hiss! This time, more than 200 people were torn apart on the spot. Everyone in the base was terrified. The chief of the base had been torn apart just now. And this time, even Little Bean and many of the higher-ups of the hunting group were torn apart. When Happy saw this, his black pupils trembled violently. Chapter 223. The people in the sky were so cruel that everyone in the base was afraid and angry. Those who dared to stand up and resist were torn apart by them immediately. At first, Happy was terrified and a little angry. Her first reaction was to wait for Brother Mo to come back. But gradually, as those people killed more and more people, the anger in Happy's heart grew. And she also thought of one thing. She couldn't rely on Brother Mo for everything. There would always be times when Brother Mo wasn't at the base. In her anger, her gaze kept trembling. Hiss! Hundreds of sounds of people being torn apart rang out again. This time, it was very close to her heart. It was right in front of Happy. She watched as a pregnant woman in front of her was torn apart. A baby who was still in swaddling clothes was torn apart. Blood splattered on her face, and pieces of flesh splattered on her body. At this moment, everything around her seemed to be right in front of her eyes in her perception. She could clearly sense the fear on people's faces. She could clearly sense the fear in everyone's hearts. She could clearly sense the indifferent expressions on the faces of those people in the sky. She could clearly sense the hideous smile on the face of the level 3 psychic master. These people in the sky were not human at all. They were animals. They were demons. They were executioners who killed people like flies. Because of extreme anger, Happy's body was trembling. She watched as the familiar people around her were torn to pieces just like that. Xiao Dou was torn to pieces. The leader of the corpse farm was torn to pieces. The leader of the base who took care of her was torn to pieces. Happy's eyes gradually turned black. There was no white in her eyes, but all of them turned black. Black like an abyss. Black like a black hole in the universe. In the sky, there was still a cruel and perverted smile on the face of the level 3 psychic master. He wanted to continue tearing these ant-like humans into pieces. At this moment, Happy seemed to have become a different person. Her entire body seemed to have an endless, mysterious, and terrifying aura of death. She suddenly raised her head and stared at the level 3 psychic master with a pair of black hole-like eyes. She opened her mouth and for the first time in her life she said, "Die!" In the next moment, a crack suddenly appeared on the surface of the level 3 psychic master's body. Then, a second, third, and fourth crack appeared. Soon, the surface of his body was covered with cracks like porcelain. Then, the surface of his body turned into a muddy yellow color. Being blown by the wind, his entire body actually turned into brownish-yellow fragments, flying away like pieces of paper. Even his clothes, hoverboard, and earrings were reduced to dust. When the people on the ground saw this, the fear and anger on their faces instantly disappeared. What replaced it was shock, astonishment, and disbelief. In the sky, those people who were originally disdainful, cold, and mocking were all stunned at this moment. Soon, someone reacted. She's a great psychic master. Kill her. Quick. The leader of the level 5 psychic master team moved immediately. He looked at Happy with a cold gaze. His psychokinesis was about to tear Happy into pieces. But when he used his telekinesis on Happy, it was completely useless. No matter how much psychokinesis he used, Happy did not seem to be attacked at all. The level 5 psychic master was shocked. His expression suddenly changed. Not good, she's at least a level 6 psychic master. At this moment, Happy's eyes, which were as deep as the abyss, were already fixed on the level 5 psychic master. The second word in his life came out of his mouth. Die. Countless cracks immediately appeared on the body of the level 5 psychic master. His body also turned into a khaki color. When the wind blew, his entire body turned into khaki fragments and scattered like paper. The rest of the mercenaries heard that this woman might actually be a level 6 psychic master, or even higher than level 6. Everyone's expression turned cold. But the leader of the level 7 Hunter Vice team showed a ruthless expression at this moment. A level 6 psychic master was very strong, but he couldn't do anything to a level 7 hunter. The psychokinesis of a level 6 psychic master couldn't tear open the body of a level 7 hunter. The psychokinesis of a level 6 psychic master couldn't resist the power of a level 7 hunter. Especially when the level 7 hunter used an energy weapon, the level 6 psychic master could only be killed. Thinking of this, a ferocious expression appeared on his face. Rip. He tore open the sleeve of his right arm. The mechanical arm inside was revealed. At the same time, the skin and flesh of his right shoulder condensed into cuticle, wrapping the entire mechanical arm. The entire mechanical arm quickly lit up with a fiery red light. The next moment, the fiery red light on his genetic weapon quickly turned into a reddish-white color. It seemed to be even hotter. Whoosh, a reddish-white energy ray was instantly shot out. It instantly hit the center of Happy's eyebrows. However, the next moment, a scene that frightened all the mercenaries happened. The energy ray of a level 7 hunter could cut open the body of any living creature. Even desolate hunters, or even great desolate hunters, would be injured by the energy rays. But now, after hitting the center of Happy's eyebrows, it didn't pierce through at all. Not even a faint trace was left behind. What kind of monster was this? At this moment, Happy's gaze turned to the level 7 hunter's team leader. His pitch-black eyes were like an abyss, like the gaze of the Grim Reaper from hell. The third word in his life came out from his mouth. Die. The level 7 hunter immediately became like the 2 psychokinesis from before. His body was quickly covered with cracks. His skin turned into a khaki color. When the wind blew, it turned into paper-like fragments and flew away. The clothes and equipment on his body also turned into fragments. In the sky, when everyone saw this scene, they were all horrified. On the ground, everyone who saw this scene was dumbfounded. They had always thought that Happy was just a mute girl, a normal person. But today, not only did she open her mouth to speak, she also displayed such a shocking ability. Other people's attacks were completely ineffective against her. And as long as she opened her mouth and said the word die, the other party would turn into ashes. Such a terrifying ability was too much of a contrast with her appearance. It was simply unbelievable. In the sky, those people no longer dared to attack Happy in their fear. Instead, they turned around and fled. Their flying skateboards were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the person who fled the fastest had already fled 5 kilometers away. Happy's pitch-black eyes stared at the person 5 kilometers away. A cold voice, like that of the Grim Reaper, came from Happy's mouth. Die! Countless cracks instantly appeared on the body of the person 5 kilometers away. He also turned into ashes. Chapter 224. The person 5 kilometers away quickly turned into ashes when Happy said the word, die. Then, Happy looked at the psychic grandmaster who had fled the furthest 3 kilometers away. Die! The psychic grandmaster was also turned into ashes. Then, the 3 mercenaries 2 kilometers away were also turned into ashes. In a short 30 seconds, 15 people were turned into ashes. The faster he ran, the faster he would die. This caused the remaining mercenaries to be greatly shaken. They were scared out of their wits. They didn't dare to move at all. Meanwhile, everyone on the ground was completely stunned at this moment. Even if Happy was dealing with the people in the sky, whoever he ordered to die would die. He ignored the opponent's level and ability. Such a terrifying ability was like the god of death in their eyes. In addition, her eyes, which had no white in them and were as black as a black hole, made everyone who looked at her feel extreme fear. Her eyes were too terrifying. As long as they looked at each other, they would feel that they would never forget those eyes in their lives. It was as if those eyes had grown in their hearts. No matter where they went in the future, those eyes would stare at them. Until the end of their lives. That was the real gaze of death. At that moment, Happy didn't continue to speak. His eyes, which were like black holes, stared at the 2,000 people in the sky. Those 2,000 people didn't dare to move at all. Even if their skin was itchy, they didn't dare to scratch it. Even if they blinked, their hearts would tremble in fear. They were afraid that if their movements were too big, they would attract the attention of the terrifying woman below. Then the word die came out of his mouth. They would be turned into ashes. Under such high pressure, cold sweat dripped down their foreheads. They felt that the string in their bodies was about to break. It was under such high pressure that someone suddenly remembered a legend in the flaming continent. He couldn't help but widen his eyes in fear and stutter. This is the legendary God's oracle. Hearing his words, the other two also remembered the legend. That was just a legend that they would occasionally see in some magazines or in some supernatural novels. Legend had it that in ancient times, there was a person who had two terrifying abilities. The first ability was absolute defense. In other words, he could ignore all attacks. Telekinesis, energy, and physical attacks. Any attack that landed on his body would not cause him any harm. Even if the strongest attack in the universe landed on his body, it would not cause him any harm. Second ability. Absolute destruction. If he wanted to destroy someone or anything, he only had to say the word, die, and that thing would be destroyed. No matter how sturdy something was, it wouldn't be able to withstand a single death from him. These two abilities were completely above any law of the universe. Even a god was nothing more than an ant in front of a heaven's oracle. The words spoken by the heaven's oracle were like the will of the heavens. That was why he was called the Oracle of Heaven. There was an old saying on the Flaming Dawn continent, if the heavens want you dead, you have to die. Being a heaven's oracle was a mistake made by the Creator. Some people joked that when the Creator was at work, he took a nap, and the oracle was born. Of course, everyone knew that this was just a myth. Just like Nuwa on Earth created humans and Kwafu chased after the sun. However, what they saw today was exactly the same as the legendary Heaven's Oracle. She ignored telekinesis attacks, ignored energy attacks, and had absolute defense. If she wanted someone to die, she only had to say the word, die, and that person would die. An unreasonable attack. An unreasonable defense. It was completely above any law of the universe. Of course, the Oracle of Heaven in their myths could destroy an entire galaxy with a single word. The woman in front of them was clearly far inferior to the terrifying Oracle of Heaven in the myths. But no matter how far inferior she was still an oracle. And who knew if she had used her full strength? In fear, these people floated in the sky motionlessly. They didn't dare to run far, nor did they dare to land. They just floated quietly. At this moment, Happy didn't speak anymore. At the same time, Mo had just left Antarctica. He was burning with anxiety. He had already ordered the clone in Wuxia to rush to base C1. However, the clone's strength was clearly far from enough to stop the 2,500 mercenaries. He had to rush back as soon as possible. The sooner the better. With this mentality, he displayed the small success Dragon Shadow step to the extreme. One step, 10 kilometers. Another step, still 10 kilometers. And it was no longer one step per second. Instead, it was continuous. He could run several steps per second. In other words, he could reach dozens of kilometers per second. But even so, he still felt that it was too slow. At this speed, it would be too late if he rushed back. While his heart was burning with anxiety, he did his best to execute the Dragon Shadow step. At a certain moment, he took a step forward. His figure instantly disappeared. There was actually a 1,000-meter-tall dragon shadow left on the spot. In the next moment, his figure instantly appeared 100 kilometers away. One step, 100 kilometers. Dragon Shadow Step. Great mastery. The small mastery of the Dragon Shadow Step looked like teleportation, but it was actually running. One step 10 kilometers and it was running. And the great mastery of the Dragon Shadow Step was teleportation in the true sense. Mo sure didn't know the principle behind it. But after Xiaolong's Dragon Shadow Step reached the extreme, it seemed to naturally be able to teleport. It was like a lot of drivers. They didn't know the principle of a car, but they knew how to drive. Great mastery of the Dragon Shadow Step. One step, 100 kilometers. A distance of more than 10,000 kilometers was only 100 steps. At a certain moment, in the quiet C1 base, a figure suddenly appeared without warning. It was Mo Sure. Everyone in the base saw Mo Sure appear. One by one, they heaved a sigh of relief. Their hearts became more at ease. As long as Mo Sure was around, there was no problem that he couldn't solve. When the people in the sky saw Mo Sure appear, they were all shocked. Even in the Flaming Land, no one could teleport like this. What was the background of this person? But Mo Sure didn't have time to care about anyone at this moment. Dragons will instantly swept across the base. He quickly found Happy's position. But when he saw Happy, he frowned. At that moment, Happy no longer had the infectious smile on his face that had always been on his face. Instead, his face was cold. There was no white in his eyes. Those pitch-black eyes were like two black holes. Even Mo Sure felt a chill in his heart when he saw it. He teleported again and arrived beside Happy. Happy! Mo Sure called out nervously. Chapter 225. Happy! Mo Sure called out nervously. However, Happy did not respond. Happy! Mo Sure quickly grabbed Happy's hand. Her hand was cold. In the next moment, Happy seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. She collapsed weakly in Mo Sure's arms. Mo Sure's heart tightened again. The dragons will quickly probed Happy's body. He saw that Happy's body was normal. Mo Sure knitted his brows tightly. If her body was normal, why did her eyes become like black holes? Why didn't she respond when he called her? And her hands were so cold? He quickly activated the blood dragon's eye. His eyes were blood red. He looked at Happy. He wanted to see through the surface to see what was wrong with Happy. Species, human. Level 1 Oracle. Ability, absolute destruction. When Mo Sure saw this, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Happy's Oracle had finally awakened. As for this ability, absolute destruction. Seeing this, Mo Sure was slightly stunned. What kind of ability was this? But no matter what, as long as Happy was fine, it was fine. At the same time, the 2,500 people in the sky saw that the Oracle had fallen. They all heaved a sigh of relief. When the other two captains who had reached level 6 saw this, they looked at each other. One of them called out, "Great Psychic, tear that Oracle apart first." When the few great psychic masters heard this, they also came to their senses. This Heaven's Oracle was the biggest problem. If they killed her first, the rest of the people would be ants in front of them. Thinking of this, the psychic power of the 5 level 2 psychic masters attacked Happy at the same time. Mo Sure was carefully handing Happy to a female hunter beside him. Suddenly, he sensed 5 huge waves of psychokinesis coming at him. The anger in his heart was like a monstrous wave. A dragon had a reverse scale, and those who touched it would die. Happy was Mo Sure's reverse scale. He split out a strand of dragon's will to protect Happy. Then, the remaining dragons will bombarded the 5 psychic masters. Bang 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 bang. Almost in an instant, the 5 great psyche masters all exploded into a bloody mist. The remaining level 1 psychics who were about to attack immediately retracted their draconic wills in fear. One of the psyche grandmasters pointed at Mo Sure and screamed in horror. "Oh no, he's a psychic master." When the 2 groups of 500 people saw this, they were all shocked. How could there be other psychic masters here? At this time, a level 5 hunter heard the order and rushed towards Mo Sure. He's a psychic master, but his body is only that of an ordinary person. Everyone, charge. Close in and kill him. Therefore, the 2,400 wasteland hunters attacked Mo Shi at the same time. All of them knew that the best way to deal with a great Psyche Master was to get close. In close combat, a Psychic Grandmaster was no different from an ordinary person. However, at this moment, Mo Shi's right arm quickly transformed into a 3-meter-long battle axe. At this moment, the shape of the battle axe was different from his original genetic weapon. The battle axe was double-edged. The double-edged edges looked like the wings of a giant dragon. The center part looked like the body of a giant dragon. The top part of the axe looked like the head of a giant dragon. The handle of the axe Mo Shi was holding was the tail of a giant dragon. From the front, it was also in the shape of a giant dragon. From the back, it was also in the shape of a giant dragon. Fire Dragon Battle Axe. At the same time, the blood-red energy stored on Mo Shi's back flowed along his arm and into the Fire Dragon Battle Axe. The eyes of the Fire Dragon Battle Axe suddenly lit up with a blood-red glow. In the next moment, Mo Shi waved the Fire Dragon Battle Axe. The double-edged edges of the battle axe also lit up with a blood-red glow. It looked like a blood-red fan-shaped trajectory. This fan-shaped trajectory was 1,000 meters long and 300 meters wide. The moment the genetic and energy weapons of the surrounding hunters that were charging towards Mo Shi came into contact with the blood-red trajectory of Mo Shi's Fire Dragon Battle Axe, all of them were severed. At the same time, their bodies were also cut in half by the blood-red energy. With just one swing of the axe, over 100 hunters were cut in half along with their genetic weapons. Among them, there was no lack of level 5 hunters. Last time, when Mo Shi fought against a level 5 hunter, he had to use the giant axe twice to kill him. But this time, the upgraded Flame Dragon Battle Axe easily split more than 100 hunters into 2 halves with just one blow. This was the power of the Fire Dragon Battle Axe. Seeing this, the rest of the hunters were all shocked. How was this possible? Wasn't this guy a Psychic Grandmaster? How did he become a hunter? No, he wasn't a hunter. The energy weapons used by hunters could only shoot out energy rays at most. Only the energy weapons used by hunters could shoot out such a huge energy blade. This guy was actually a hunter. All the hunters and Psychic Grandmasters felt like they had been F***ed. Not only was he a Psychic Grandmaster, but he was also a hunter. It was impossible for such a person to be unknown in the Flaming Land. They were all powerful existences that ruled over a region. How come they had never heard of this guy before? Moreover, there was no need for such a person to come to a broken place like the first hunting ground to train, right? If they wanted to go, shouldn't they at least go to ancient places like the Dragon Burial Valley and the Falling Dragon Sea to train? Mo Shi did not give them any chance to react. He stood on the ground and did not even move a single step. He swung the Fire Dragon Battle Axe in his hand continuously. In the sky, the hunters and psychokinesis did not even have a chance to escape under such an attack. They were all cut in half along with their genetic weapons. In just a few swings of the axe, 700 to 800 people died under the axe. When the remaining 1,000 or so people saw that this person was actually a hunter, they were all scared out of their wits and turned to escape. However, could they escape? Mo Shi's dragon was swept across and everyone fell from the sky directly to the ground. Moreover, they smashed heavily on the ground. The ground was smashed to the point that cracks appeared continuously. Some people's heads even fell directly to the ground. At this point, all the mercenaries had completely lost the thought of resisting. They were facing a Psychic Grandmaster, and a hunter at that. Even if they resisted, only death awaited them. Lord Hunter, we were wrong, we were wrong. Please spare our lives. Lord Desolate Hunter, we have offended Lord Heaven's messenger and you. We only ask that you be magnanimous and let us go like farts. They were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would not have dared to come to the first hunting ground no matter how much money they were offered. Some of them were originally resting. However, when they heard that the reward for this mission was much higher than before, they immediately ended their vacation and rushed over. Now, it seemed that their decision was very stupid. If they had known this would happen, they would not have dared to come to the first hunting ground. Mo Shi did not have the slightest bit of pity for these people who were begging for mercy. His dragon was swept across and plundered a few people's memories. Then, the Fire Dragon Battle Axe swept across. Swish! All the 1,000 or so people were cut in half. Now they knew they were wrong? It was too late. Chapter 226. Of the 2,500 people, only a dozen or so had been killed by him. The rest had all been killed by Mo Shi. As a level 10 great hunter, he was able to kill 2,500 psychic masters and hunters. This was simply unimaginable on the flaming continent. Of course, Mo Shi had the bonus of dragon will. But on the flaming continent, even if he cultivated both psychic power and hunters, he could at most kill 1 or 2 psychic masters and hunters. Mo Shi had killed nearly 2,500 people who were of a higher realm than him, and there was no lack of level 5 hunters among them. And all of this was thanks to the Flame Dragon Battle Axe. On the flaming continent, only hunters and above could release such a large amount of energy attacks. But now, Mo Shi had the Flame Dragon Battle Axe. As a level 10 great hunter, he could release such a large amount of energy attacks. This was too much of an exaggeration. Of course, the Flame Dragon Battle Axe was powerful, but it also consumed a lot of energy. After swinging it a few times, Mo Shi could clearly feel that more than half of the energy on his back had been used up. If he swung it a few more times, the energy would probably be completely used up. At this time, Mo Shi put away the Flame Dragon Battle Axe. He took Happy from the woman beside him. Before he left, he said to the Hunter Division leader, Guo Jutao, take off their equipment, study it, and choose 2,500 people to equip them. At this time, in the base chief was already dead. The staff officer was also dead. The only person in charge now was Guo Jutao. When Guo Jutao heard Mo Shi's words, he quickly nodded. Don't worry, Mr. Mo. We'll do as you say. In the entire base, only a few people dared to be like Guo Jutao and call Mo Shi you instead of you. It wasn't that Guo Jutao didn't respect Mo Shi. He had known Mo Shi for a long time. He just felt that he used to call Mo Shi you. If he called him you now, it would create a sense of distance. At the same time he asked again. Mr. Mo, how is Happy? Do you want me to get a few doctors to take a look? No need. Mo Shi said faintly. Then, with Happy in his arms, he took a step forward and teleported to the corpse farm. This time, he did not leave behind the phantom of the giant dragon. After the dragon shadow step reached the large success stage, Mo Shi could leave behind a giant dragon's shadow or not according to his wishes. Not leaving behind the image of the giant dragon would make it easier to hide their tracks. As for leaving behind the phantom dragon, it had other uses. The people in the base only regained their senses after Mo Shi left. Mo Shi had once again saved the base and resolved its crisis. This time, the enemy was very strong, ridiculously strong. In their eyes, he was like a god. In the end, in front of Mo Shi, he was still killed instantly. What was the upper limit of Mo Shi's abilities? However, they were already used to Mo Shi's strength. What shocked them even more was Happy. She was a girl who couldn't even speak normally, and could only stay in the corpse farm to do some work that was looked down upon by others. She was actually a terrifying existence who would kill anyone she wanted to kill. This completely overturned their understanding of her. Although they didn't dare to say it out loud before, some people were dissatisfied with Happy in their hearts. Mr. Mo was so strong, but his woman was just an ordinary person and a mute girl. Wasn't Mr. Mo afraid that Happy would drag him down? In particular, some women were even more jealous of Happy. Why would Mr. Mo like a useless mute girl like her? But now, other than shock, people were also in awe of Happy. In the face of an unreasonable existence, you had to die when she wanted you to. How could they not be in awe? At the same time, they also admired Mo Shi's judgment. They finally knew why Mo Shi had been so loyal to Happy, an ordinary person, all these years. Mr. Mo was still the best. His judgment was so sharp. At that moment, Mo Shi returned to the corpse farm with Happy in his arms. Mo Shi carefully placed Happy on her bed. He covered her with a blanket. He pulled a chair for himself and sat by the bed, guarding Happy. At the same time, he flipped through the memories that he had just plundered. Soon, he saw the scene of Happy using the death ability. Mo Shi couldn't help but be shocked. Was the ability of the Oracle so heaven-defying? Whoever she wanted to kill would have to die. It ignored all defenses and levels. When the Oracle's ability was activated, even if the person standing in front of her was the strongest existence in the Flaming Origin continent, Happy only needed to say the word death to turn him into ashes. Moreover, when the oracle's ability was activated, she was in an absolute defense state. Any attack that landed on her body would have no effect at all. This was too much of a bug. Since the apocalypse, everything that had happened could be explained by science. However, the oracle's ability was beyond Mo Shi's understanding. However, he also knew that this was not a fantasy. It was because he couldn't understand it with his current knowledge. It was just like how the ancients couldn't understand modern mobile phone calls and video calls. In the eyes of the ancients, this was completely the work of the gods. At the same time, Mo Shi also learned about the legend of the oracle from the memories of one of the hunters. Legend had it that the oracle of heaven could destroy a star field with a single word. This ability was simply too terrifying. No wonder it was called the product of the creator's mistake. At the same time, Mo Shi finally understood why Happy didn't know how to speak. With such a bug-like ability, would he dare to let her speak casually? Half an hour later. On the teleportation platform of the first hunting island in the flaming origin continent. As a blue and white light appeared, a figure slowly condensed. This person was none other than the handsome young man, Xiaofan. He looked up and saw that this was the teleportation platform of the first hunting island. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The first hunting ground was too scary. A wild beast was too scary. The 2,500 mercenaries he brought were all annihilated except for himself. As for the other 2,500 mercenaries, needless to say, they were definitely wiped out as well. They even lost a cheetah mech. He was lucky to be able to keep his life. At the same time, he secretly swore that when he became a desolate hunter in the future, he would definitely go back and take revenge. Dismember that desolate beast and that fellow into 1,000 pieces. However, the most important thing now was that Bertha had been killed by him. Without this level 6 psychic, he, as a level 8 desolate hunter, could easily kill her father and avenge his parents. At the same time, he would take back control of the first hunting island. As long as he took control of the first hunting island, wouldn't he be able to control all the creatures in the first hunting ground? By then, it would be even easier to kill that wild beast and that guy. However, he never dreamed that Mo Shi had already left something in his body. Chapter 227. When Xiaofan thought that he would soon be able to avenge his parents, the fear and joy of escaping from death completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by anger and hatred. He was like a lion going for revenge. His eyes began to turn bloodshot. He strode toward the office of the hunting ground owner, Belki. Along the way, there were many guards on the island. But they knew that Xiaofan was the son-in-law of the hunting ground owner. They were all trying to curry favor with him. How could they stop him? When Xiaofan arrived at the hunting ground owner's office, the hunting ground owner was not there. He asked the guard next to him and was told that the hunting ground owner had something to do and would be back soon. Xiaofan took a deep breath, took the red wine bottle on the table, and poured himself a full glass. Then he gulped it down. It was not like drinking red wine at all. It was more like drinking cold water. He poured another large glass of red wine and drank it all in one gulp. Then he lay down on the sofa and played with the empty glass with a mechanical hand on his right. He seemed to be very relaxed. In fact, his eyes were fixed on the door. After a while, 2 figures came in quickly. They were the hunting ground owner and his wife, Belki and his wife. When the couple saw Xiaofan lying on the sofa, they quickly stepped forward and asked, "Xiaofan, did you find them? Where's Bertha?" Xiaofan suddenly sat up with a sinister smile on his face. "Dead." "What?" The hunting ground owner's wife looked pale. Her legs were weak and her body was trembling. Belki frowned and stared at Xiaofan. "What happened?" Xiaofan sneered. "Your good son and good daughter are dead." Then he raised his head proudly and said, "I killed them." Belki and his wife heard this and felt like they were struck by lightning. The woman's legs were weak and she collapsed to the ground. Belki took 2 steps back, opened his eyes wide and kept shaking his head. "No, no! They can't be dead." Xiaofan saw this and couldn't help laughing out loud. Ha ha ha! The pleasure of revenge in his heart made him crazy. Belki made him lose his family. He had long wanted him to taste the pain of losing his family. He had long wanted to see the desperate and sorrowful expression on his face after losing his family. Now he finally saw it. Belky placed his hand on the iron desk and questioned with a pale face. Beast, what did you do to them? Shachi laughed as the corners of his mouth twitched nervously. What did I do? Kill them, tear them into pieces and feed them to the zombies. When the woman heard this, she screamed. His vision went dark, and he fainted. When Buyer Chi heard this, his body and voice trembled. Why? Shachi sneered. Because I am the son of the owner of the first hunting ground 20 years ago. Before the sound of his voice faded away, his genetic martial art instantly flashed. He immediately stabbed out. Poof! With a muffled sound, Belky's head was nailed to the wall. When the guards outside heard the commotion, they quickly kicked the door open and jumped in. However, when they saw that the hunting ground master was nailed to the wall by his son-in-law using a genetic weapon, their expressions changed drastically. Now that the hunting ground master was dead, there was no need for them to work for him anymore. Moreover, they were only level 1 or 2 hunters. How could they be a match for a level 8 hunter? Next, Shachi twisted the head of the hunting ground master's wife in front of all the guards. Still, none of the guards dared to make a sound. Shachi looked at the bodies of the couple and the entire first hunting island outside the window. He had made up his mind. Next, he would reorganize the forces on the first hunting island. There were more than 50,000 people on the first hunting island. After reorganizing these forces, he would add to the Sandstorm Hunter Group. The Sandstorm Hunter Group's strength would be greatly improved. Then, he would go to other hunting grounds to improve his strength. When he became a hunter, he would go to the first hunting ground again. Kill that wild beast. Destroy that guy. Thinking of this, Shachi could not help but feel proud. He laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha. However, his voice came to an abrupt stop here. This was because an invisible shockwave had already spread out from his body. Almost instantly, it spread out to a radius of 100 kilometers. If one looked down from the sky, they would see a big blood-red circle spreading rapidly with a hunting ground master's office as the center. The Zero virus had broken out. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, all living things were infected with the Zero virus at this moment. Whether it was animals, plants, or microbes. A very regular circle appeared in the center of the first hunting island, which was originally full of greenery. The whole circle was filled with blood-red color. At this moment, all the humans turned into zombies at an extremely fast speed. And all the zombies on the first hunting island had undergone a second mutation at this moment. They mutated into monsters that did not look like humans. Some grew 6 legs. Some grew 2 heads. Some had a bloody hole in their stomachs, and another head grew out of the bloody hole. It looked extremely horrifying and disgusting. And within a radius of 100 kilometers, the infected creatures would continue to spread out. They would bring the virus out of the infected area. And the scariest thing about the Zero virus was that it could be spread through the air. So, in just 2 days, the entire first hunting island had been completely infected. Fortunately, the surroundings of each hunting island were completely isolated by the sea. And there was also an air isolation system that covered the entire island. Basically, every hunting island had the same air isolation system. It was to prevent the virus in the hunting grounds from spreading to the flaming origin continent. At this point, the entire first hunting island had become a completely uninhabited area. The first hunting island was originally an inconspicuous place, and very few people came here. Now it was all infected. So, at least in a short term, no one would disturb Earth. This was Mo Shi's plan. Of course, this plan could only be delayed for a while. One day, someone would come to the first hunting island again. There would be a day when someone would investigate Earth. But this day would definitely not come soon. Mo Shi, on the other hand, could take advantage of this time to improve his strength. With his current strength, if he used all his trump cards, he would be invincible below level 10 hunters. And when he became a hunter one day, he was confident that he would be able to fight a level 10 hunter even if he did not use the Azure Dragon avatar. Of course, Mo Shi did not immediately improve his strength at this time. He was still guarding Happy's bed. Before Happy woke up, he was still a little worried. While guarding Happy, Mo Shi checked in his mind. System. Checking in for a special event. Chapter 228. System. Sign in for a special event. Emosure said. Sign in successful. Sign in event. Destroy the enemy from the flaming continent. Sign in reward. 1 overclocked particle gun, 1 cheetah mecha. Emosure was puzzled. This overclocked particle gun sounded very high-end. Could it be the technology of the flaming continent? He focused his attention on the overclocked particle gun in his backpack. Overclocked particle gun. Also known as overclocked particle emitter. Technology that surpasses the flaming continent. It can emit overclocked particles that penetrate the energy shield of the mecha and cause damage to the mecha. Emosure was delighted. He took out the overclocked particle gun. It looked like a barrel. His entire arm could reach into this barrel. Inside the barrel, there was a handle. Emosure reached his right arm into the barrel and grabbed the handle. The next moment, the entire barrel began to eject components. Click, click, click. There were more than a dozen soft sounds. The entire barrel had changed shape. It wrapped Emosure's right arm tightly. At the same time, a scope and a barrel popped out. The shape of the gun looked like a rifle. Most of it was black. But there were several streamlined fluorescent lights on the gun. There was no trigger on the gun. Emosure was puzzled. How could he shoot without a trigger? While he was puzzled, countless red rays were produced from the barrel. These rays could directly illuminate Emosure's right arm. Then, through the nerves on his right arm, they were directly connected to the neurons in his brain. Emosure's brain suddenly felt as if there was something extra. The next moment, he suddenly realized that this overclocked particle gun was actually controlled by his brainwaves. In other words, he could shoot with his consciousness. Damn! Which superplane's technology is this? Emosure couldn't help but exclaim. According to the memories of the people he plundered, although the technology of the flaming continent was much more advanced than that of Earth. But there was no technology to control guns with consciousness. Emosure was still thinking about how to deal with the cheetah mecha. Now that he had the overclocked particle gun, this problem was solved. As for the cheetah mecha, Emosure glanced at it in his mind. On the surface, this cheetah mecha looked exactly the same as the cheetah mecha from the Sandstorm Mercenary Group. But in reality, the Sandstorm Mercenary Group's cheetah mechas were second-hand mechas retired from the military of the Flaming Land. On the other hand, Emosure's was a brand new mecha. However, when Emosure saw the mech's description, he felt a headache coming on. Just by knowing the computer technology on Earth, it was impossible to control it. He also needed to understand the soul's algorithm, adhesion codes, and other computer knowledge from the flaming continent. Of course, all of this information was contained in the manual of the mecha. However, Emosure had never been interested in computers. It was too difficult for him to learn this knowledge. It seemed that he had to find a few people who were interested in this kind of thing, just like the Sandstorm Mercenary Group. While Emosure was thinking, Happy's eyelids suddenly twitched. Emosure was overjoyed and quickly put away the overclocked particle gun. After a moment, Happy opened his eyes. Her eyes had returned to normal. They were still those big eyes that seemed to be able to speak. Happy's complexion also recovered a lot. When she saw Emosure, her eyes immediately lit up, and her gaze kept trembling. Emosure knew what she meant and said, "Happy, I'm fine." At the same time, a warm current surged in his heart. "How are you?" Emosure asked Happy. There was a hint of confusion in Happy's eyes. She gestured. "Brother Emo, what happened to me?" Emosure was shocked. "You don't remember?" Happy shook her head gently and gestured. "Remember what?" Emosure frowned slightly. "Those people who came to our base to cause trouble." Happy still shook her head blankly. However, a contagious smile soon appeared on his face. She gestured. "They must have been dealt with by Brother Emo." Emosure frowned slightly again. After asking a few more questions, he knew. After Happy woke up this time, she was still unable to speak. Moreover, she had no memory of this incident at all. Fortunately, other than this incident, she still remembered everything else. Only then did Emosure's brows completely relax. This was good too. He wanted Happy to always remember happy things. And what happened this time was clearly a dark and terrifying memory to Happy. It was best if she did not remember. After that, Emosure did not leave the base. Instead, he accompanied Happy for 3 days. He wanted to make sure that this incident did not have any negative effects on Happy. Fortunately, the matter this time only affected Happy physically. Her body was very weak. However, with Mo Shi's recovery medicine, there was no need to worry about this at all. After taking it, she completely recovered 5 minutes later. 10 days later, 100 kilometers away from the Chilean base, one of Mo Shi's clones finally saw the cheetah mecha. The cheetah mecha was killing some zombies and mutated beasts. Its head and body were constantly shooting energy rays in all directions. Any grass, wood, metal, or stone would only end up being pierced by these energy rays. And those zombies and mutated beasts, without exception, were directly cut in half at the waist by the energy rays on the mecha. Moreover, their wounds were directly burned, and there was no possibility of them recovering and reviving. A few level 10 super mutated zombies had originally planned to use traps to catch the cheetah mecha. However, it had infrared scanning, radar detection, heat sensing, and many other sensing technologies in its body, so it could easily see through the traps. All the zombies were extremely frightened. They did not understand why such a thing suddenly appeared here. They could not break through its energy shield at all. They could not dodge its energy rays. They could not avoid its various detection. Their speed was far inferior to this thing. They could not beat it even if they wanted to, and they could not escape even if they wanted to. In the end, these infected creatures were almost all killed by the cheetah mecha. It was also at this moment that a figure suddenly appeared 1,000 meters away from the cheetah mecha. This person was none other than Mo Shi. At this moment, an overclocked particle gun had already been formed on his arm. It looked as if his entire right arm had turned into a long gun. It was directly aimed at the cheetah mecha. The cheetah mecha's heat detection had already detected Mo Shi's arrival. But at this moment, it was killing the last few infected creatures. It did not pay attention to Mo Shi at all. Mo Shi's consciousness moved. Whoosh! A stream of bluish-white particles instantly shot out. When this stream of bluish-white particles arrived in front of the cheetah mecha, an energy shield instantly appeared on the cheetah mecha's body. Chapter 229. With a thought from Mo Shi, the particle gun shot out a stream of blue and white particles. Whoosh! It crossed a kilometer in an instant and shot toward the cheetah mech. The cheetah mech also sensed the attack coming. A yellow energy shield quickly appeared around the mech. However, when the blue and white particles hit the energy shield, there was no reaction. It instantly passed through the energy shield. It was as if the energy shield didn't exist at all. The next moment, the particle stream hit the mech. In just an instant, the cheetah mech seemed to have been electrocuted. Sparks and lightning kept coming out of its body. The yellow energy shield around the mech quickly disappeared. Seeing this, Mo Shi quickly retracted the particle gun on his right arm. The next moment, the genetic weapon on his right arm formed. He instantly flew 100 meters into the air. The giant axe came down with a bang. Boom! A crack that was 100 meters long and 5 meters wide instantly appeared on the ground. In the center of the crack, the cheetah mech had already been cut into hundreds and thousands of pieces. Sparks kept coming out. This was the characteristic of the mechs of the Flaming Land. The reason why the mechs were so strong was because of the energy shield. With the energy shield it could block any attack. And once the energy shield was broken, basically any hunter could destroy it with an energy beam from an energy weapon. However, this energy shield alone was enough to stop all the hunters. This was because with the current technology of the Flaming Dawn continent, there was no other way to break this energy barrier apart from a desolate hunter using brute force. And now, Mo Shi's particle gun was technology that surpassed the technology of the Flaming Land, so it could easily break the energy shield. At this moment, Mo Shi scanned with his dragon mind and found a fingernail-sized chip in the pile of debris. According to the memory he obtained, even if the mech was destroyed, the mech owner could still locate the chip. Mo Shi landed and picked up the chip. He gently rubbed his right index finger and finger. The chip suddenly broke into pieces. The cheetah mech was finally dealt with. Next were the spider drones. Each spider drone had a chip in it. So, he had to destroy all the spider drones and then destroy the chips in them. But the world was so big. Who knew where those spider drones were flying to now? Moreover, there were quite a number of spider drones. Even with Mo Shi's abilities, who knew how long it would take for him to destroy all of them? Moreover, These spider drones also had energy shields. Even if others encountered it, they would not be able to destroy it. Only Mo Shi could do it himself. He pondered for a moment and decided not to dwell on it any longer. The voice in his mind said, "System, check in for a special event." The system's voice quickly sounded frowny face sign in successful. Sign in event, destroy the cheetah mecha. Sign in reward, 1,000 overclocked particle spider drones. He checked the rewards in his mind. Overclocked particle spider drone. Upgraded version of the spider drone. It can emit a stream of overclocked particles to destroy the energy shields of other spider drones. It was true that whatever he lacked would come. He was just worrying about how to get rid of those spider drones when he received this reward. Then, the next step would be to find a few people who knew computers to operate these overclocked particle spider drones and the cheetah mecha. After returning to the base, Mo Shi called Guo over. He said, "I have a great use for selecting computer geniuses in the base." Guo was now the newly elected chief of the base. Mo Shi had saved the people of the base so many times, so he naturally would not disobey Mo Shi's words in the slightest. He immediately issued an order to search for computer geniuses in the base. Of course, there were only more than 100,000 people in the base. Moreover, most of these people were now engaged in manual labor. It was undoubtedly difficult to find one or two computer geniuses among them. Mo Shi also ordered the level 10 psychokinesis in all the bases in the world to search for computer geniuses in their respective bases. These level 10 psychokinesis now had a certain amount of weight in their respective bases. After all, they were the strongest group of people in the base. In just 3 days, more than a dozen bases had selected people who were talented in computer science. After Mo Shi read the information of these people, he frowned slightly. Many of these people were not young anymore. There was even a person in his 70s who was about to die. For the remaining young people, Mo Shi made dozens of copies of the books that the system had given him when he rewarded the mecha. He let them study by themselves. As geniuses, their ability to self-study should be very strong. As for Mo Shi himself, he took advantage of this time to continue controlling the sea dragon clone to devour at the bottom of the sea. Now he was devouring these super mutant beasts at the bottom of the sea to accumulate energy for the sea dragon clone. When he broke through, the sea dragon clone would be able to break through immediately. Secondly, he was looking for an opportunity to break through. He planned to wait for the sea dragon clone to finish devouring the remaining level 10 super mutant beasts in the trenches before heading to Bermuda. More than a month later, Mo Shi learned about the self-study of those geniuses. The results disappointed him. All the geniuses looked at these books as if they were reading heavenly books. Even some of the geniuses who claimed to be able to easily grasp the knowledge in any computer book they read. They were also at a loss in front of the books Mo Shi gave them. Some of the computer knowledge in the books was simply beyond their understanding. Some of the knowledge even completely subverted what they had learned. It was the complete opposite of what they had learned. How could they study by themselves? Mo Shi could only smile bitterly in his heart. Was it really impossible to find a computer genius among the millions of people left in the world? It was also at this time that in several bases around the world, people had been killed by the spider drones. Those spider drones were like hunters, constantly hunting down the people in these bases. People used almost all kinds of methods to deal with them. However, whether it was physical attacks or firearms attacks, they had no effect on these spider drones. Their bodies could produce a kind of earthy yellow energy shield. Even rockets could not penetrate this energy shield. Their bodies were only the size of a fist. It was difficult to find them if they were hidden. Therefore, for a time, these spider drones became a nightmare for those bases. 2 days later in the evening, Mo Shi controlled the sea dragon clone to devour a level 10 super mutant beast in a trench. While he was resting, a great hunter cautiously approached the corpse farm. After finding Mo Shi, he said respectfully, "Mr. Mo, 2 monks are looking for you." Chapter 230. While Mo Shi was resting, someone came to report that 2 monks wanted to see him. In the apocalypse, there weren't many monks. Mo Shi had only seen 2 monks since he came to this world. He was slightly puzzled. Why were these 2 monks looking for him? "Invite them in," Mo Shi said. More than 10 minutes later, the 2 monks, one old and one young, entered the corpse farm. The old monk was in his 60s or 70s, while the young monk was in his 20s. When the old monk saw Mo Shi, he put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Ba. How have you been, benefactor Mo? The young monk also bowed. Ba. He added in his heart, good job. Mo Shi looked at the two monks, one old and one young. Both of their clothes were torn in many places. Other than their faces, there was almost no clean place on their bodies. It was obvious that they were travelers. Mo Shi asked in astonishment, you too, walked over from base C2? The young monk looked at his master with some resentment and said, we sneaked out of base C2. Naturally, no one sent us a helicopter. Mo Shi looked at the two of them again. Both of them were ordinary people, but they actually left base C2. They walked more than 1,000 kilometers in the wilderness and came to base C1. Although Mo Shi's clone had basically cleaned up most of the infected creatures in Wuxia. But this old and young man, as ordinary people, actually walked more than 1,000 kilometers to base C2. This was really shocking. Especially considering that this old monk was already in his 60s or 70s, it was even more surprising. Mo Shi asked, you two came to see me because the old monk had walked too much, his body looked very weak. The young monk spoke on his behalf. The young monk scratched his bald head and said, benefactor Mo, aren't you looking for a computer genius? My master thought that I played all kinds of game consoles very well, so he insisted on recommending me. But I've never touched any computer. The chief of the base passed me over. In the end, my master said that they didn't know what was good for them and insisted on sending me to you personally. I really have to hand it to him. My master is just a bag of old bones. How can he be so spirited? Besides, being good at gaming and being a computer genius aren't even close. The old monk coughed twice and glared at the little monk. Then, he took the water from Happy and drank a mouthful. That's the general idea. Then, he cast a glance at Happy before he spoke to Mo Shi. Big brother Mo, is this sister-in-law? So beautiful. If I can marry such a beautiful wife one day. The old monk looked at the little monk helplessly and said, don't worry. Profound reflection. The little monk stuck out his tongue and giggled. Ba. Color is emptiness. As he spoke, he hurriedly took the cup of water and drained it in one gulp. Then, he handed the cup to Happy. Sister-in-law, please give me another cup. The old monk said apologetically. Benefactor Mo, Jian Xian lacks discipline. However, he can be considered a genius in any game. At this time, he is at the mercy of others. Mr. Mo, if you don't mind, please take him in. Mo Shi looked at the little monk, who was taking the second cup of water from Happy and gulping it down. He nodded. All right, let him try. Anyway, they couldn't find a suitable person now. The old man and the young man had walked thousands of miles to give them a chance. Thinking of this, Mo Shi asked someone to copy a set of computer books he had obtained from the system. Take a look. I'll look for you in 3 days. Mo Shi said lightly. Seeing this, the old monk immediately put his palms together and said, Ba. The little monk added in a low voice. That's good. He said it in an extremely low voice, thinking that no one could hear it except for himself. However, Mo Shi took another look at the little monk. The little monk's heart couldn't help but thump. Did he hear it? For the next few days, Mo Shi didn't bother with the little monk. He controlled the sea dragon clone and swam towards Bermuda in the Atlantic Ocean. 3 days later, he was not far from Bermuda. It was on this day that he went to the residence of the two monks during his rest time. When the old monk saw Mo Shi, he stood up to welcome him. He said to Mo Shi, Benefactor Mo is here. Mo Shi looked around the room and didn't see the little monk. He probed with his dragon senses and found that the little monk was reading in the bedroom. The old monk called the little monk out. When the little monk saw Mo Shi, his eyes lit up and he said, Brother Mo, can you find me a computer? I've been reading these books for the past 2 days without being able to practice. My hands have been itching for a long time. I wanted to look for you, but my master kept stopping me and insisted that I finish reading the 3 books. The old monk explained with a smile, You haven't even built a good foundation, yet you want to practice. You're like a tree without roots that can't last long. Seeing this, Mo Shi's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that this little monk was really a genius in this area? He asked the little monk, "How many books have you read now?" The little monk replied, "I've read 2. I'm still reading the last one." Mosher asked, "Can you understand them?" The little monk shook his head. "I can only understand 20%. But there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be learned through practice. If I had a computer." Mosher was secretly surprised when he heard this. There were so many computer experts from so many bases around the world, but none of them could understand it after so many days. This little monk had never touched a computer before, but he could understand 20% in just 3 days. If he wasn't a genius, then what was? But he still had to verify it. Guo Jutao, who accompanied him, thought that the little monk was talking nonsense. But he could also see that these 2 monks seemed to have some relationship with Mosher. He immediately said, "I'll get someone to find a computer." In the apocalypse, resources such as computers in the bases were prioritized for the laboratory. Ordinary people had never even seen a computer, let alone use one. Mosher waved his hand and said, "No need." As he said this, he moved his mind. From his backpack, he took out something that looked like a belt about 10 centimeters wide. He handed it to the little monk and said, "Tie it to your waist." Everyone was a little confused. Weren't they talking about computers? Why did he suddenly take out a belt? Although the little monk didn't know why, he still tied it to his waist. Mosher pointed to a button on the belt. He said, "Press it." The little monk immediately pressed it. The next moment, 2 light green lights were projected in front of the belt. Upon closer inspection, these weren't just 2 simple beams of light. In one light, something like a computer keyboard appeared. In the other light, a virtual screen appeared. Chapter 231. A virtual screen and a holographic touch keyboard. When these popped up from the belt, everyone's eyes widened. The older ones had only seen this kind of thing in movies and TV shows before the apocalypse. The younger ones, who were born after the apocalypse, had never seen this kind of thing. Even before the apocalypse, there had never been such advanced technology on Earth. Where on earth did Mr. Mo get it? Mosher didn't explain. He said to the little monk, "Try it." The little monk was surprised. His right hand swiped across the virtual screen. Suddenly, the virtual keyboard lit up. He was unlocking the keyboard. The next moment, his hands began to type on the keyboard. He typed very slowly. After all, it was his first time touching a computer keyboard. But the position of his fingers was not wrong at all. After a few minutes of simple testing, his typing speed became faster. As he typed, a picture of a Buddha appeared on the virtual screen. It was just a very simple, rough picture of a Buddha. Only the outline of the Buddha could be seen. On the left side of the Buddha, there were 4 words, Amitabha. On the right side of the Buddha, there were also 4 words, good. As the Buddha's mouth opened and closed, these 8 words kept appearing on the screen. Finally, countless words appeared. These words then converged to form another Buddha. Black lines appeared on the old monk's forehead. This disciple of his had never been normal. He didn't look like a monk at all. The others were surprised. This little monk had only learned how to program for 3 days? Nonsense, right? Mosher's eyes lit up. Learning how to program in 3 days did sound ridiculous. But it didn't rule out that some geniuses could always do some incredible things. Thinking of this, Mosher moved his mind again. He took out the cheetah mech from his backpack. This cheetah mech was 5 meters long and 2 meters tall. Its whole body was cast with black metal. Its whole body was black. Just by standing there, it would give off a breathtaking aura. When everyone saw the sudden appearance of the mech, they all felt a chill in their hearts. The timid ones directly took 2 steps back. Even Guo Jutao couldn't help but feel nervous. Mosher said, "There's no need to make the programming so complicated for now. As long as you can use the keyboard to control this mecha, it'll be fine. The mech manual is in the system. Look for it yourself." Everyone was a little surprised when they heard this. Mecha? This was not Earth's technology. How many more treasures did Mr. Mo have that he had yet to take out? When the little monk heard Mosher's words, he immediately jumped in front of the cheetah mech. His eyes sparkled, and his face was filled with excitement. He kept stroking the body. He cried out in surprise. Umitba, what a wonderful thing. Mecha? Holy sh*t, Brother Mo. Where did you get it? It's actually a real mecha. F*ck, Big Brother Mo, are you really letting me control it? Master, can I say that I'm the F*ck? Don't be angry, it's just an exclamation. The little monk liked to play video games since he was a child, to the point that he was obsessed with them. Naturally, he was also obsessed with the mecha in the game console. Now that he had seen a real mecha, how could he not feel excited? The old monk sighed helplessly. Sigh, this old monk is not good at teaching. I've embarrassed myself in front of everyone. While the little monk was pleasantly surprised, he spent more than 2 minutes to find the mech manual in the system. Soon, the mech was activated. The eyes of the cheetah mech suddenly lit up with a blood-red light. The eyes of the jet-black cheetah suddenly lit up with a blood-red light. It looked even more terrifying. Mo sure reminded him. Don't activate the weapon system first. The little monk naturally understood Mo sure's meaning. He immediately said, I understand, Big Brother Mo. Then, his fingers tapped on the keyboard a few times, and the cheetah mech slowly moved. The little monk was so excited that he kept crying out. Holy *t, this is so wonderful. This feels so good. This is so much better than operating a mech in the game console. Master, I'm so happy. The old monk's shiny head was full of black lines. Even someone as calm as him could not help but scold. Divine reflection. The little monk acted as if he did not hear him at all. He continued to operate the mech while shouting. Everyone was shocked that Mr. Mo actually had such a mech, but they were also shocked by the little monk's genius. He had only self-taught for 3 days and he had already reached such a level. Wouldn't those who had studied for decades cry in the toilet? In fact, it was not their fault. Although the computer knowledge of the Flaming Land was similar to that of Earth in many ways. But there was a large part of it that was completely opposite to that of Earth. The more computer knowledge one had on Earth, the more difficult it was for them to accept the knowledge of the Flaming Land. This was because the knowledge of the Flaming Land had completely overturned their previous understanding. For people like the little monk, who had never studied computer science on Earth, it was easier for them to start from scratch. Mo sure said to Guo Jutao next to him, arrange for him to practice outside the city wall for the next few days. Guo Jutao nodded. Yes, Mr. Mo. After Mo sure finished explaining the matters here, the next step was to focus on improving his strength. Although Hunting Island No. 1 had been destroyed, this could only stop the people of the Flaming Land from coming for a period of time. There was only one way to really make them not dare to come to Earth again. Strengthen himself. Therefore, Mo sure had to make himself as strong as possible before they came. Mo sure controlled the Sea Dragon avatar. After 5 hours of wandering, they had already arrived at the Bermuda area. The Bermuda Triangle was an equilateral triangle located in the Atlantic Ocean. Each side of this triangle was nearly 2,000 kilometers long. In this huge triangle area, there were often mysterious disappearances of planes and ships. It was said that the first person in human history to experience the danger of the Bermuda Triangle was the navigator Columbus. He once led a fleet of ships through the Bermuda Triangle and experienced monstrous waves that he had never seen before in his life. Their ship seemed to be sailing between canyons. All the compasses on the ship malfunctioned, and all the crew members were dizzy. Columbus hurriedly ordered them to return. But because the compasses failed, they couldn't tell the direction at all. Fortunately, their ship finally reached the shore safely. But at this time, they were too far away from their scheduled landing site. Regarding this, Mo sure had some understanding in his previous life. And the scientist had already given an explanation. The reason why planes and ships often crashed here was because there was an abnormal tape here. Therefore, when planes and ships passed by here, their electronic equipment would malfunction and eventually disappear. However, people still paled at the mention of the Devil's Triangle. Chapter 232. Mo sure came to the Bermuda Sea. He spread out his dragon's will and took in the sea within a 100-kilometer radius. Within his detection range, there didn't seem to be any difference. However, this was only the edge of the Bermuda Sea. He swam toward the center as he searched. According to Mo Shi's detection, there were obvious fish and shrimp zones in the Bermuda Sea. Some areas had fish and shrimp, while some areas didn't have any fish or shrimp. Mo Shi thought that this must have something to do with the magnetic tape. After swimming for about 600 kilometers, Mo Shi finally found something. He saw a flat-topped pyramid in the dark bottom of the sea. The pyramid was about 2,000 meters from the sea surface. The pyramid was about 100 meters tall and had a flat top. Each bottom of the pyramid was about 400 meters long. An underwater pyramid? Mo Shi was very surprised. He immediately swam toward the pyramid. He came near the pyramid. He used his dragon's will to search carefully several times. He saw that the underwater pyramid was also made of huge stones. Each of the huge stones was the size of a house. The entire pyramid looked magnificent and did not lose to the Egyptian pyramids at all. Moreover, this underwater pyramid was even more complete. Although there were traces of long-term seawater erosion on each stone, at least the entire structure was complete. Mo Shi swam around the pyramid a few times and didn't find anything strange. There was no entrance either. It seemed that this was just a simple pile of stones. However, when Mo Shi expanded his dragon's will to a 100-kilometer radius, he found that there were 3 other pyramids within this range. The shape, size, and material of each pyramid were almost exactly the same as the pyramid in front of him. Mo Shi expanded his search range again. In the end, he found that there were as many as 100 similar pyramids within 1,000 square kilometers. This was a huge group of pyramids. Every pyramid was equally majestic and huge. Even Mo Shi, who had seen a lot, couldn't help but be shocked. If this discovery was made public in the civilized era of his previous life, it would definitely shock the whole world. Mo Shi spent half a day carefully exploring this group of pyramids. He finally found that the pyramid in the center of this area was completely different from the other pyramids. The Iwu pyramid in the center was more than 800 meters tall. It was almost twice as tall as the other pyramids. The most special thing was that the material of the pyramid in the center was not ordinary stone. Instead, it was some kind of translucent stone that looked like glass. Mo Shi swam around the pyramid several times. He used his draconic will to investigate carefully. He found that the layout of the pyramid was indeed like an ancient tomb. The entrance to the tomb was in the center of the lowest level of the pyramid. From the outside, there was nothing out of the ordinary. However, when Mo Shi used his draconic will to investigate, he was able to detect that there was a mechanism on the boulder. The mechanism was very complicated. If an ordinary person tried to force their way in, they would probably be instantly turned into meat paste by the mechanism inside. However, the sea dragon clone was a terrifying existence that had reached the 10th level of a wild beast. With the current conditions on Earth, there was almost nothing that could break through its body's defenses. Therefore, Mo Shi didn't care about anything else. His 10-meter-long tail suddenly swept out. Bang! With a loud bang, the boulder was smashed into pieces. A 50-meter-long square passageway appeared on the pyramid. Mo Shi was inwardly overjoyed. Fortunately, the passageway was 50 meters long. If it was any smaller, the sea dragon clone wouldn't be able to enter at all. His draconic will probed along the passageway first. He already knew the various mechanisms inside like the back of his hand. However, after fully understanding these mechanisms, Mo Shi didn't care about them anymore. He controlled the sea dragon clone and swam forward. Ding, 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 ding. Iron arrows kept shooting out from the cracks in the walls on both sides. However, when these iron arrows hit the sea dragon clone, they kept making tinkling sounds. The scales on the surface of the sea dragon clone weren't afraid of these iron arrows at all. Mo Shi didn't care at all and continued to swim forward. After swimming 50 meters, the stone walls on both sides began to move and squeeze toward the middle. Mo Shi sneered in his heart. The giant tail swung violently. Bang, bang, with 2 consecutive sounds, the stone walls on both sides were smashed into pieces. Even the entire pyramid seemed to shake twice. In fact, with the current strength of the sea dragon clone, as long as Mo Shi was willing, he could smash the entire pyramid into pieces at any time. However, in order not to destroy the overall structure of the pyramid, he swam in through the passageway. Next, Mo Shi destroyed 5 more mechanisms in a row. Only then did he reach the center of the pyramid. Here, there was another passageway that diagonally led downwards. The passageway looked pitch black. However, Mo could detect that at the end of the pitch-black passageway was a vast world. Without any melancholy, he continued along the passageway. During this time, he broke through 3 more mechanisms in a row. Only then did he reach the end of the pitch-black passageway. When he arrived here, he suddenly felt enlightened. He saw that this was a huge valley. Corals grew everywhere in the valley. And almost all the corals were faintly fluorescent. They were red, green, yellow, and purple. They looked like neon lights at night in the city. However, they were far from being as tacky as neon lights. The light on these coral bushes was softer. Mo was secretly surprised. Could this be the legendary undersea garden? In his previous life, he had once read a report about the undersea garden on the internet. It was said that a large coral bush was found at the bottom of the sea, and it looked like an undersea garden. However, the undersea garden that Mo saw in front of him was even more gorgeous than in the report. He controlled the 20-meter-long sea dragon clone and used his dragon will to investigate the surroundings as he slowly swam forward. Soon, he discovered that this coral forest was more than 70 kilometers long. In this 70-kilometer-long coral forest, there were dozens of creatures. These creatures all had human heads and fish bodies. Their gills had evolved into fish gills. However, their bodies were not all like mermaids. Some had bodies like octopuses. Some were like seahorses. Some had bodies like huge whales. In short, all kinds of undersea animals had human heads. After Mo's blood dragon's eye, these animals had all reached level 10 super mutated. However, their species column did not show that they were beasts. Instead, it was a general term, mermaid. Mo shook his head inwardly. All right, these mermaids had completely overturned his beautiful imagination of the word mermaid. At this moment, a few nearby mermaids with squid bodies had already discovered Mo. Chapter 233. After discovering Mo's sea dragon clone, the cuttlefish mermen immediately swam towards it. Each cuttlefish merman was more than 300 meters long. But on this 300-meter-long body, there was a normal human head. It looked extremely out of place. As they swam towards Mo, they kept making gurgling sounds from their throats. With the help of the foreign language proficiency skill, Mo could easily master any language on Earth. At this moment, he heard the meaning of these giant cuttlefish mermen. There's an intruder. Kill it. It looks like a strange fish without any intelligence. At this point, a cuttlefish merman opened his mouth. Puff! A ball of jet-black liquid spurted out. It went straight towards Mo's sea dragon clone. When this mass of black liquid passed by the seaweed next to it, the seaweed continued to emit black bubbles and began to rot rapidly. It turned out that the liquid spurted out by the cuttlefish merman was extremely corrosive. However, this extremely corrosive was only relative to the creatures on Earth. For the sea dragon clone, it was not worth mentioning at all. How dare you show off your meager skills in front of an expert? Mo almost said, "Great mighty heavenly dragon" in his heart. Then, a mouthful of strong acid was spat out. Puff! A mass of dark green liquid spurted out. In just an instant, the fan-shaped area with a radius of 1 kilometer in front of him was shrouded in the strong acid breath. At this moment, not only was the seaweed in this area rapidly rotting, even the rocks in the surroundings were bubbling and melting rapidly. At the same time, the seawater within this area was constantly boiling. As for the cuttlefish mermen, the skin on the surface of their bodies was quickly corroded, revealing the flesh and blood inside. Then, the flesh and blood were also corroded, revealing the bones inside. The mouths of their human heads kept letting out mournful screams. Hiss! Hiss! But this scream only lasted for a few seconds before their heads were corroded until only residue was left. The commotion here quickly attracted the other mermen. The 2 hammerhead shark mermen hurriedly sent a signal to the other mermen. There's an intruder. There's an intruder. All merfolk, support them immediately. In less than a moment, more than 50 mermaids emerged from the corals of the entire valley. Some of them were only about 10 meters tall. Some of them were 400 to 500 meters tall. There was even an electric eel mermaid that was 1,000 meters long. On the 1,000-meter-long body, there was only a small human head. It looked extremely strange. On its head, there was a pair of cherry-like antennae. The two antennae flashed with blue light. Mo aimed at the 1,000-meter-long electric eelman. He swung his tail vigorously and swam towards the electric eelman at full speed. The electric eel made a few squeaking sounds from its mouth. Mo understood what he meant. You don't know the meaning of death. Soon, when the two of them were only 100 meters apart, the pair of antennae on the electric eel's forehead shone brightly with blue light. A bolt of lightning shot straight at the sea dragon clone. This lightning bolt had a diameter of more than 2 meters. Even a level 10 super mutant beast would be seriously injured if it was electrocuted, if not killed. However, the sea dragon clone was indeed level 10, but it was not a super mutant beast. It was a whole realm higher than a super mutant beast. It was a desolate beast. Buzz buzz. The electric current hit the sea dragon clone in an instant. Mo only felt a burst of numbness all over his body, as if he had just taken out a sauna. He felt comfortable all over. Comfortable, Mo said. When the electric eelman saw this, a look of horror flashed in his eyes. One had to know that electric eelmen were basically unstoppable in this sea area. Even the powerful killer whales and mermaids had to retreat in front of the electric eel mermaids. After all, as long as they shot out an electric current, even a killer whale would be paralyzed and unable to move. But now, his electric current did not have the slightest effect on this little strange fish. Thinking of this, the electric eelman's 1,000-meter-long body swam over. He directly surrounded the sea dragon clone. Then, from beginning to end, electric current flashed. And in the middle of the encirclement, a huge electric net was formed. In this electric net, electric currents more than 2 meters in diameter flowed rapidly like giant pythons. Buzz buzz buzz, buzz buzz buzz. These electric currents kept hitting the sea dragon clone. Mo was once again electrocuted until his whole body was numb. Comfortable, Mo said in his heart. This was the most comfortable feeling he had ever felt in his life. It was as if he had a full body massage. The electric eelman saw that this small strange fish not only did not feel the slightest pain under his electric current, but also twisted his body comfortably. This made him even more horrified. What kind of monster was this? In horror, he turned around and wanted to escape. Mo originally wanted to let him electrocute him a few more times, but he didn't expect him to want to escape. He shook his head helplessly. His body quickly grew in size amidst the crackling sounds. In the next moment, his body reached nearly 200 meters long. He opened his huge mouth and directly bit the electric eelman's tail. Crack! The tail was bitten off. The electric eelman opened his mouth and screamed in pain, constantly twisting his body. The area within a kilometer was suddenly stirred up into a turbid mess. But with Mo's strength, he easily suppressed this electric eelman. He pressed him under his body and then continued to devour him, bite by bite. More than half an hour later, the electric eelman was devoured by him. At this time, the other hundreds of mermaids around had already surrounded him. Mo moved his mind, and more than 50 tentacles instantly grew on the sea dragon clone's body. The suction cups on each tentacle had an extremely strong suction force. Those mermaids at the bottom of the sea were sucked into the suction cups one after another. Then, from the suction cups, a sanguisurincus stretched out and directly pierced into the suction cups. It absorbed the blood of these mermaids. These mermaids kept struggling. But no matter how they struggled, they could never escape the control of the suction cups. In just a few minutes, these hundreds of mermaids were all devoured by the sea dragon clone. In this way, Mo slaughtered more than 500 mermaids in just 1 hour. Nearly half of the mermaids in the entire valley were slaughtered. The remaining 500 or so mermaids, seeing how ferocious this strange fish was, hurriedly fled forward in horror. But how could their speed compare to the speed of the sea dragon clone? Mo controlled the sea dragon clone and chased forward while devouring these mermaids. A moment later, he chased to the end of the valley. There were traces of buildings there. The first thing that caught his eye were the 2 tall stone statues on both sides. Chapter 234. Each of the 2 huge stone statues was more than 500 meters tall. They were like 2 door gods. There were many small holes on the stone statues, which were obviously eroded by seawater over countless years. What surprised Mosher was that these two stone statues were not mermaids. They were humans. After passing through the gate between these two door gods, there was a seemingly very wide area. There were large areas of buildings here. Houses, bridges, stone gates, stone roads. There was also a stone pyramid that was 1,000 meters tall. Under the reflection of the surrounding coral bushes, this huge city looked full of vicissitudes after the baptism of time. Mosher's heart moved slightly. Legend had it that in history, there was a civilization called the Atlantis civilization. Later, it suddenly disappeared overnight. Some people said that the entire Atlantis sank into the sea. Could it be that this was it? Those mermaids fled into the city and quickly hid in these buildings. Of course, the mermaids were very large in size. Even if they wanted to hide, they could only hide in those tall buildings. There were also some mermaids who fled to the pyramid in the center of the city. They crawled on the ground in front of the pyramid. They kept praying loudly. "Great King of Atlantis, please save your people. Great King of Atlantis, there are outsiders who are slaughtering your people. Please save your people." At this time, the huge pyramid, with a rumbling sound, cracked to both sides. From it, a mermaid swam out. This mermaid was completely different from the other mermaids who were ugly, strange, and ferocious. This was a female mermaid. The upper body was completely a woman's body. The lower body was a fishtail. This was completely consistent with the legendary image of a mermaid. This woman, whether it was her figure or appearance, was absolutely one in a million. Her pair of eyes, as blue as the sea, seemed to be able to hook people's souls. She looked at the group of mermaids below and said, "My people, as your king, I, the Queen of Atlantis, will not let any creature hurt you." All the hundreds of mermen below lowered their heads even more. "Thank you, Queen." The Queen of Atlantis shifted her gaze away from her people. He turned to Mosher's sea dragon clone. When her gaze fell on the sea dragon clone, a cold murderous intent flashed in her azure eyes. He let out a roar. "Hiss! You dare to harm my Atlantean people? Die!" As she spoke, cracking sounds could be heard from her body. Her body also began to expand rapidly. It grew longer and thicker. In the end, her body reached a length of 1,500 meters. Moreover, after she grew bigger, her head didn't stay the same like other fish. Instead, his head grew longer as well. Mosher was slightly surprised. During battle, their bodies would enlarge in size in order to increase their combat power to the limit. Normally, his body would shrink several times or even 100 times in order to reduce his energy consumption. This was a skill that could only be mastered by desolate beasts. He immediately used the blood dragon's eyes to look at the Queen of Atlantis. Species, submermaid. Level 10 ultra-mutated wild beast. Abilities, extreme charm, thousands of sharp teeth. It turned out that this wasn't a real mermaid. It was a subspecies of mermaid that only had a portion of human bloodline. At the same time, Mosher knew that she was only a level 10 ultra-mutated beast. Although she had mastered a certain level of desolate beast abilities, due to the restrictions on Earth, she would never be able to reach the level of a desolate beast. Mosher had experienced the extreme charm skill once before. With the blood dragon's eyes, these were basically floating clouds in his eyes. As for what thousands of sharp teeth were, Mosher didn't know. However, no matter how powerful a level 10 ultra-mutated beast skill was, it was nothing in front of a level 10 desolate beast. The mermaid's huge head opened its huge mouth. And the huge mouth opened wider and wider. In the end, not only did it crack to the back of her head, but it also cracked to her neck. Continuing down, her entire upper body cracked open. The crack was filled with 2 rows of uneven yellowed teeth. There was still some raw meat hanging between the teeth. She looked ferocious and disgusting. Compared to her previous appearance, it was a complete contrast. This huge mouth directly swallowed Mosher's sea dragon clone. Mosher sneered in his heart. He controlled the sea dragon clone, stretched its body, and floated there. He allowed the mermaid to devour it. The mermaid's huge mouth directly bit the sea dragon clone's neck. The 2 rows of sharp intersecting teeth were each more than 2 meters long and looked like 2 rows of sharp swords. Crack! Under this bite, the sea dragon clone didn't move at all. The mermaid was slightly shocked. What was going on? With her sharp teeth, even a rock could be easily crushed. She couldn't bite this strange fish's body? Mo Shi was controlling the sea dragon clone at this moment. Its two front claws, which were as thick as tree trunks, grabbed both sides of the mermaid's big mouth. Then, he tore it forcefully. Hiss! It actually tore open another 500 meters of the mermaid's big mouth. It tore her upper jaw, along with her entire head, off her body. Blood immediately gushed out. It spread out in the seawater. The mermaid didn't even have the chance to struggle before she was torn in half by Mo Shi. Instant kill. And he didn't use any skills. He killed the Queen of Atlantis in one fell swoop with brute force. All the mermaids present were horrified when they saw this. Their great Queen of Atlantis died just like that. And she was killed by this strange fish in one blow. How was this possible? The Queen of Atlantis had lived for hundreds of years and was the most powerful existence in the entire sea. How could she be killed in one blow? But now the reality was in front of them, and they had to believe it. At this moment, they looked at Mo Shi with fear and despair in their eyes. In their eyes, the Queen of Atlantis was a godlike existence. And now, even their god had been killed by this strange fish in one blow. What else could they do? Run? Resist? What a joke. Seeing that these mermaids had all lost the will to resist, Mo Shi immediately unleashed thousands of tentacles and swallowed them all. At this point, Mo Shi had already devoured more than 1,000 mermaids. At the same time in his mind, he said, "System, sign in." The system's voice quickly sounded, and it was still so pleasant to the ear. Sign in successful. Sign in location, Atlantis. Sign in reward, Dragon Palace upgrade. After Mo Shi checked this reward, he was overjoyed. After the upgrade of the Dragon Palace, the benefits it brought were far beyond Mo Shi's imagination. Chapter 235. After Mo Shi checked in at Atlantis, his reward was the upgrade of the Dragon Palace. He checked the reward in his mind. Virtual Dragon Palace upgraded to Level 2. Level 2 Virtual Dragon Palace generates virtual arrow towers and virtual city walls. The virtual city wall could resist any attack below LV-10, including LV-10 hunters. The virtual arrow tower could cause damage to any creature below LV-10, including LV-10 hunters. The automatic attack range is 10 kilometers. Attack and defense are passive skills, automatically triggered when encountering the enemy's attack and defense. At the same time, Mo Shi saw a scene in his mind. Around the virtual Dragon Palace of Base C1, it was like building a house in the game. Virtual bricks were quickly piled up. Virtual stones were quickly piled up as well. Just a few minutes later, a virtual city wall was built around the entire virtual Dragon Palace. This virtual city wall was 10 times taller than the physical city wall around the base. It reached a height of 100 meters. Arrow towers were quickly built on top of these virtual city walls. These arrow towers were more than 200 meters tall. The entire virtual city wall was like a ring-shaped mountain range. The arrow towers above were like mountain peaks. There were no less than 100 virtual arrow towers like this. They covered the entire base. Mo Shi looked at these and was overjoyed. After the upgrade of the virtual Dragon Palace, any creature below level 10 hunters could not cause damage to the virtual Dragon Palace. And if they dared to attack the virtual Dragon Palace rashly, the virtual Dragon Palace's counterattack would be absolutely awesome. As long as the enemy did not send any hunters, the rest of the hunters would die. This effect was too heaven-defying. Of course, others could not see such a heaven-defying virtual Dragon Palace. In their eyes, there were no tall city walls or arrow towers at all. Now that he had this level 2 virtual Dragon Palace, Missouri Shi could not help but have an idea in his mind. Previously, he thought that when he was strong enough, he would go to the Flaming Land to explore. They dared to treat Earth as a hunting ground, so he would let them know who the prey was. But it would take a long time to realize this idea. But now that he had this virtual Dragon Palace, he could go to the Flaming Land directly. He could use Hunting Island 1 as his base. He could use this to develop and strengthen his forces. And now on the entire Earth, there were fewer and fewer places where one could sign in. The Flame Beginning continent was undoubtedly a brand new check-in map. Thinking of this, Mo Shi couldn't help but feel a little excited. However, with his cautious nature, It was naturally impossible for him to go now. At the very least, he had to find the dragon ruins at the bottom of the sea to see if he could raise his strength to the level of a hunter. Thinking of this, he shrunk his body and observed the surrounding terrain. After investigating, he found that the surrounding terrain was almost exactly the same as the terrain on the map he had obtained before. Except for the underwater city, the other mountains and ravines were almost copied from the map. The location of the dragon ruins was marked on the pyramid that the mermaid had just come out from. Wuxia was overjoyed, and immediately came to the top of the pyramid. Looking down from here, he saw a pitch-black cave entrance. The cave entrance was huge. The diameter was almost exactly the same as the bottom side of the pyramid. The existence of the pyramid seemed to be to block the entrance of the cave. Wuxia used his draconic psyche to investigate the cave. The cave was still empty, and there was nothing inside. After carefully probing the inside a few more times with his draconic psyche and confirming that there was no danger inside, Wuxia controlled the sea dragon avatar and swam into the cracked pyramid. Then he entered the cave from the bottom of the pyramid. This was an oval-shaped cave. The longest part of the cave was more than 5,000 meters long. The widest part was more than 2,000 meters. On the other side of the cave, there seemed to have been a huge exit in the past. But because of the changes in the Earth's crust, the cave entrance had completely collapsed. Wuxia looked around for a moment and sighed in his heart. "I finally found it," he said in his mind. "System, sign in." The system's voice immediately sounded frowny face sign in successful. Sign in location, dragon ruins at the bottom of the sea. Sign in reward, 1. Underwater roaming, 2. Water dragon's breath, 3. A wisp of draconic psyche, 4. A drop of titan dragon blood. This should have been the lair of a water dragon in the past. This time, he directly received 4 rewards. Wuxia glanced at it and roughly knew what the 4th reward was for. However, he still suppressed the excitement in his heart and finished reading the first 2 skills. Underwater roaming was obviously a skill that could allow him to survive in the water. With this skill, Wuxia's main body could also survive in the water for a long time. Water dragon's breath could spit out energy water pillars. In terms of destructive power, it was far inferior to flame dragon's breath. But under certain circumstances, it was still very useful. The 3rd draconic psyche was needless to say. He had obtained a wisp of draconic psyche before, and now with this wisp of draconic psyche, his draconic psyche had reached the peak of level 3. As long as he obtained a little more draconic psyche, he would be able to reach level 4. This already made Wuxia happy. After reading these 3 rewards, Wuxia shifted his gaze to the 3rd reward. His heart was beating faster than usual. Titan dragon blood. After swallowing, it can help the host break through the limit and reach the hunter realm. And obtain the corresponding skills. F***CK. It finally appeared. Wuxia couldn't help but feel his heart beat faster. He had always been cautious and liked to plan before acting. At this time, he couldn't help but directly put the sea dragon clone into his personal reservoir. The next moment, his consciousness returned to his main body. At this time, it was late at night in the base. There was no one around. Everything was silent. Wuxia's draconic psyche probed again. After confirming that it was completely safe, with a thought in his mind, he took out the drop of Titan dragon blood. This drop of blood was contained in a bottle only the size of a finger. He opened the bottle cap. He saw that this drop of blood was a clear bright red. It rolled in the bottom of the bottle. It was like a drop of water rolling on a lotus leaf. Just by looking at this drop of blood, one could feel that it contained an extremely majestic energy. This majestic energy was much greater than the energy in the blood dragon wings on Wuxia's back. In the past, it was the Titan dragon bloodline modification liquid. But now, this drop was directly the Titan dragon blood. One could imagine that the two were not on the same level at all. Wuxia suppressed the excitement in his heart and poured this drop of blood-red liquid into his mouth. This drop of liquid melted as soon as it entered his mouth. It turned into an extremely large amount of energy and rushed to all of his meridians at an extremely fast speed. It followed all of his meridians and rushed to every cell in his body. Chapter 236. The energy contained in a small drop of liquid was unimaginably huge. At first, it flowed along his meridians. But soon, the small meridians could not contain the huge amount of energy. Thus, the huge amount of energy began to break through the barriers between the cells in his body. The huge amount of energy rampaged through Mo Shi's body like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. It seemed to want to tear apart, break through, and destroy the cells in Mo Shi's body. The pain of his body being torn apart continued to come. Only now did Mo Shi realize how important the modification liquid was to his body. If not for the modification liquid, he would have exploded into a bloody mist when this huge amount of energy entered his body. At this time, although Mo Shi's body was in intense pain, he could still barely withstand the terrifying energy. But soon his body had reached its limit. The violent energy seemed to be about to tear his body apart. At this moment, the dragon claws on his arms condensed. The Titan dragon breastplate on his body had also condensed. In this way, the pain in his arms and torso was alleviated a little. It was also at this moment that his legs began to slowly become thicker and longer. In the end, they actually became 3 times longer and 3 times thicker than before. Furthermore, tough and shiny black scales had also grown out of his legs. His feet were also 3 times larger than before. And accompanied by the sound of bones cracking, there was a continuous sound. His feet gradually turned into a pair of dragon claws. At this time, except for his head, his arms, legs, and torso had all turned into dragon form. Of course, overall, the dragon form at this time was not the true dragon form. It was equivalent to a dragon's body in human form. In this form, Mo Shi's physical strength was extremely terrifying. Whether it was his attack or defense, they were all greatly enhanced. Gradually, the pain in Mo Shi's body slowly subsided. And in his mind, the image of the giant dragon appeared again. It was still the shadow of the giant dragon. But this time, the shadow was more solid than the previous few times. When the giant dragon looked at Mo Shi only felt a sense of horror in his heart, as if he was looking at an abyss demon. The dragon was several meters long. It streaked across the sky, blotting out the sun. And the world below the giant dragon was a continuous stretch of mountains. However, there was no longer any vegetation on the mountain. Scorched earth was everywhere. From time to time, they could see smoke and fire filling the air. In this smoke-filled mountain, there were corpses of other dragons everywhere. There were blue, purple, red, and black dragons of all colors. They could be as large as a few thousand meters or as small as a few dozen meters. It was clear that a war between dragons had just taken place here. Mo Shi still wanted to take a closer look, but the giant dragon in the sky had already retracted its wings and swooped down. Again! Mo Shi was speechless. Although he had already experienced such a situation several times. But every time he experienced it, it felt like his first time. After all, when it first appeared, it was just a blurry shadow. And now, it was becoming more and more realistic. Therefore, even someone as strong as Mo Shi could not help but tremble slightly. He wanted to escape, but he found that his legs were already frozen in place. In the end, he could only watch as the huge dragon opened its cave-like mouth and completely swallowed him. Only then did Mo Shi suddenly open his eyes. At this time, he was about 3 meters tall. He was like a giant. Fortunately, the roof of the corpse farm was about 3.5 meters high. Otherwise, his head would have hit the roof at this time. His whole body, except for his head, was covered with a layer of black scales. It looked very visually striking. Of course, this was not his real body. It was just his skill. He took a look at his attributes in his mind. Name, Mo Shi. Level 1 Scavenger, Level 3 Long Yen Shi. Evolution Path, Titan Dragon. Phew, Mo Shi let out a long breath. His eyes shone brightly. Because of excitement, his cheeks were a little red. Finally, he had become a scavenger. When he was a level 10 Great Hunter, he could already kill a level 5 scavenger. Now that he had become a level 1 scavenger, with his strength, killing a level 6 scavenger should not be a problem. At this time, he moved his mind and withdrew his skill. His whole body returned to the body of a human. Looking at his naked lower body, Mo Shi shook his head helplessly. If only he could borrow a pair of pants from Green Fatty. Now that he had evolved into a scavenger, according to the previous plan, Mo Shi should go to the Flaming Land. But when he signed in before, he obtained a strand of dragon will, which made Mo Shi's dragon will almost reach the peak of level 3. This made him temporarily put the plan to go to the Flaming Land on hold. Because before, the plague dragon had divided his dragon will into tens of thousands and attached to many people. Now he just had to find a way to find those people and devour the plague dragon's dragon will in their bodies. Then his dragon will would definitely be promoted to level 4. With level 4 dragon will, his combat strength would increase by a lot. At that time, it would be safer to go to the Flaming Land. With Mo Shi's current dragon will, as long as he was within 1,000 meters of people with dragon will, he would be able to sense the dragon will in their bodies. Early the next morning, Mo Shi was in the entire base, sensing the dragon will in these people's bodies. With his speed, he quickly circled around the base. In the end, he found more than 10 people with dragon will in their minds. Of course, compared to Mo Shi's dragon will, the dragon will in these people's bodies was very weak. Mo Shi came in front of a middle-aged woman. His dragon will could easily sense the plague dragon's dragon will in that person's body. The middle-aged woman looked at Mo Shi with a slight fear in her eyes. This was the reaction everyone had when facing Mo Shi. Mo Shi did not say much. He directly wrapped the woman with dragon will to prevent the plague dragon's dragon will from escaping. Then a part of dragon will entered the woman's body and directly invaded her brain. At this moment, the plague dragon's dragon will that had been deeply hidden in the woman's body finally knew what Mo Shi was going to do. He sneered. "Lowly human, you want to devour my dragon will? How dare you show off your insignificant skill in front of an expert?" As he spoke, his dragon will suddenly expanded and tried to devour Mo Shi's dragon will. Unfortunately, his dragon will had already gone through 10,000 years, so there was not much left. Later on, it split into tens of thousands of strands, so there was not much left. Moreover, Mo Shi's dragon will devour skill ignored the opponent's level. Therefore, Mo Shi easily devoured the plague dragon's dragon will. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.